This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program?
Yeah.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
Now, live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
We are live on a Tuesday edition of the Sports Bash. 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Just use the hashtag SB Live. What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Mike Gill. We got a lot going on today as we get you ready for the Phillies and Padres game number 2. The probables tonight, Aaron Nola, Michael King. That's your matchup at Citizens Bank Park. We got more for you on that, but the Phils with a nice win last night. And it was a nice win for a couple of reasons. The offense showed up last night. You had just a plethora of offensive performers last night, but it's the guys that you are hoping to see, right? It's Kyle Schwarber. It's Bryce Harper. It's Alec Bohm. Those are the guys this team needs. And last night it was good to see those guys be the guys. And basically the reason why you won the game last night. Christopher Sanchez, very good performance last night. We'll get to him in just a minute. But when you take a look at why this team won, 2 homers for Schwarber, another one from Bohm, double from Harper. Castellanos actually had a couple dubs last night. We all know if the Phillies are going to win a World Series, it's got to be Schwarber. It's got to be Harper. It's got to be Bohm. And quite frankly, it has to be Castellanos. Brandon Marsh, a couple hits last night. Trey Turner had 2 hits in his return. You got 4 out of Rafael Marchand last night. And we got, an interesting thing I saw regarding Marchand I'll get to in just a little bit last night. But up and down the lineup, you had everything last night. Schwarber, the 2 hits, the 2 home runs, the 4 RBIs. He walked twice. Kyle Schwarber is an interesting guy that I don't know what the odds are, but keep an eye on as a possible long shot MVP type of guy. And you might say, wait, what? Schwarber's hitting 253. When was the last time Schwarber hit over 250, if ever in his career? His on-base percentage is .373. That's really good. I mean, it can get better, but if he's going to start creeping that up in the month of June, if he has like a hot month of June like he typically does, you could be looking at a guy who could get himself up into like the 265 range. And if he can, hit himself a couple more homers, he's up to, I think, 16 home runs now. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, if he starts cranking out some homers here, can he get himself up to the 40 range? I know he's at 16 right now, so he's got a ways to go to get there. But, I mean, he's almost halfway to 40. And, at 48 and 24, you're still got plenty of games left to go to get to 40 homers. So if Harper hits like 260-something with 40 homers and an on-base percentage, he might be an outside shot guy with Mookie Betts. With the broken hand out for a while, so he's probably out of the MVP mix. He'd be contending with Bryce Harper. Josh tells me Schwarber is plus 9,000 right now. Harper's plus 350. I'll take Harper at plus 9,000, even over Harper at plus 350. I mean, as a long shot, I'm talking about plus 9,000. That's a pretty that's a really long shot. But Schwarber last night, the month of June, he has been just unbelievable. He's really the story when you talk about the month of June. And nobody seems to have the answer to why. They asked, Rob Thompson last night, and Topper's basically like, I don't have the answer to the question, nor should he have the answer to that question. But what we do know is Kyle Schwarber in the month of June, right now, 5 homers, 11 RBI in the last 7 games. He's hitting .407 with an on-base percentage over 500. He, right now, in the month of June at the very least, is the MVP of the Phillies. And it's exactly why this team is, so interesting. Because they get guys who have their moments and they are big at big times, and then they kind of dip. And the problem the Phillies have had is the guys carry them like Castellanos did, and then he dips in the playoffs at the worst times. So the streakiness of the Phillies has been the Achilles heel. The streakiness of this team has been part of the problem for this team the last couple of years. They've been so streaky, and it's the reason why they get streaky hot, and they're so streaky, and it's one of the reasons they get streaky cold. But last night they had the streaky hot moment with Schwarber. Turner comes back, welcome back with a couple of hits there. Bryce Harper with a couple of hits, including that double that drove in a couple runs. He didn't drive in the runs. It was Castellanos who drove in the run. Sorry. And then Bohm. Bohm last night, 3 for 5, hit the 3-run homer. Good to see him back. He's up back over 300 at 307, the on-base at 359. Bohm is the fact that he got into that little cold streak there. I know a lot of people were kind of pounding their chest at like, hey, he is what he is. He's just an average guy. Alec Bohm is every time, you hear people who played the game watch him and will say like, hey, he's just a professional hitter. And it's not even that he's a professional hitter. He is a guy who really is I don't want to say he's a non-traditional. He's a traditional hitter, but in today's game, he's kind of non-traditional because he doesn't hit with a lot of power. He is more of your gap-to-gap double guy, uses all fields. He's the guy that, like, back in 1985, we would love watching. And yet, for some reason, there's people who just don't enjoy that today because we want guys who hit a lot of home runs. And Bohm is, sadly, there was some hope that he could be a 25-homer kind of guy, and maybe he is that guy at some point. It doesn't seem like it, but it doesn't seem to matter. He is on a torrid pace right now in terms of RBI. In fact, he has more RBI through the Phillies' first 70 games than any other Phillies player since Raul Ibanez. Remember that 2009 season that Raul Ibanez had when he was just like bananas? Alec Bohm is having that kind of season. I mean, that's pretty unbelievable when you think about it. Bohm's, by the way, plus 3,000. His odds for MVP are actually better than Schwarber. And if you ask me, I think I actually rather bet on Schwarber at plus 9,000. Just because of the power numbers. I think Bohm, the problem with Bohm in terms of an MVP candidate, he has a ton of RBI, but the home runs just aren't going to be there for him. And, when you're talking about an MVP candidate, you got to have the power to go along with it. But it was an interesting game last night. When you take a look, slow start, Phillies get to 2 with the home run from Schwarber. And then they get another one in the 4th and then tack on another one in the 5th. And 3 in the 5th, and then 2 more in the 6th. So the offense cranked out 18 hits last night. And you've been kind of waiting for either 2 things to happen for the Phillies. 1, you've been waiting for them to kind of snap out of this thing. Or 2, you've been kind of wondering if this was the beginning of the June swoon for a team that had been so hot. If they were going to cool off a little bit. Luckily, last night, it didn't seem that happened. It seems more that, hey, you went to London and then traveled on the road and played a really good Baltimore team and a decent Boston team. Boston's, okay. They're not great. And you just got a tough part of the schedule kind of wrapped around that London trip, and now you're back home. And I think the Phillies, maybe we talk about the two things that could have happened, the team kind of fizzling out and maybe going through a rough patch, or kind of coming home and needed the home cooking. It seems like maybe they went through that rough patch, had a little rocky night. Now 18 hits last night, 9 runs. You know what ends up happening the next day is you have a rough night at the office. But I think last night was the start of the Phillies kind of getting out of that June swoon a little bit, coming back home, getting a couple guys going. It'll be interesting to see if they can get Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm, hopefully Stott, Castellanos, Marsh. I mean, now you got some depth to the lineup. Feels a little different than it did just a week ago. Just adding Turner to that lineup now pushes Castellanos hitting the 6 hole last night. That means Marsh is down in the 7th spot. It changes the dynamics of the lineup big time. It's amazing sometimes in baseball how just one guy can change the dynamics of a lineup, how it just pushes everybody back one spot, and how much that means for a team. 609-403-0973, the text board, 609-403-0973. Hit us up on the text board. I think Sanchez last night, you have to try to figure out Sanchez. He goes 7 innings last night. It's one of the problems with Sanchez has been he hasn't been able to get deep into games. He typically gets to about the 5th inning, and then, but last night, the walks, only 1. Gave up scattered 6, just the 1 earned run. Who had the error? It was, Marsh in center field last night. He missed, and that's something we got to get into. Because Marsh center field, it's the night where Rojas is not there, and they send Rojas down, and we talked about it yesterday. You're sacrificing defense now for offense. You're now saying that you're going back to the mentality that the offense is more important. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It just was noticeable last night that Marsh makes that error in the field, and it leads to a run. The Phillies, keep in mind, they have the best record, or one of the best records in baseball. They have run out in the division lead. And they have this record after 2 couple seasons of slow starts, but making the playoffs. Now they're playing with an 8-game cushion in the National League East. And I think it's in large part that we have to keep in mind that their defense has been much better than it's been the last 2 years. How much was their lack of defense, right? How much was the lack of defense part of the reason why they got off to these mediocre starts? And I don't want to start seeing shoddy defense be part of the problem with this team. But Sanchez last night I thought was really good. It was a pleasure to watch him last night. He was very effective. 7 innings, scattered 6, as we mentioned, the 5 strikeouts. And he got you to the point where you can hand it off. Alvarado came in, got the strikeout, and then they turned it over to Ruiz to finish out the game last night. But not a lot of scary moments in that game as the Phillies beat the Dodgers 9-2. And we'll get you the lineup when that comes out tonight here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. But Schwarber hit homered a couple times, Turner 2 hits. Alec Bohm, 3-run home run. Let's talk a little bit more about Bohm, and he had a couple singles last night. And Rafael Marchand, who had 4 hits. The Bohm 3-run homer puts the game away, right? That kind of just puts the icing on the cake as they pound out 18 hits. But Rafael Marchand had 4 hits last night. Now, I think Rob Thompson kind of hinted like, hey, maybe he went to church or something, because he didn't hit the ball all that hard last night. But he did have 4 hits. You got an interesting conundrum coming up if you're the Phillies. Yesterday, they had to make a decision on who to send out when Trey Turner came back. JT Realmuto was at the ballpark yesterday. He was walking around, and I imagine that he'll be back sometime in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Are the Phillies going to have to make a decision about the backup catcher? Is Rafael Marchand the guy that sticks with this team over Garrett Stubbs. And I saw somebody, tweeting about this or posting about this. Garrett Stubbs is a popular guy. He's a vibe guy. He's a guy that everybody likes. He's the music guy. He's the guy that has been a part of these 2 runs. But is Marchand the better option and the better player as the backup center, as the backup catcher that you have to keep around? I definitely think it's something that the Phillies might have to consider. The Phillies might have to consider saying, hey, we've had a lot of fun. We've been a very good team, but we might have to take that next step, and Rafael Marchand is the guy that can help us take that next step. I talked about this when the Phillies lost Real Muto, in that is Marchand the starter and Stubbs just stays in his normal role. Remember, Marchand's a switch hitter, so he can play every day. You don't need to platoon him. And you can just kind of keep Stubbs in the role. But I think the question will be, when Real Muto's ready to return, is Rafael Marchand going to be the guy who sticks with this team? Because here's a couple things to consider. As the team lost last year, they lost the year before, they kept a lot of pieces the same. And I think some of that continuity has got them out to this lead. But they're going to have to figure out the piece that's going to get them over the top. And you might say the backup catcher is not the difference between winning the World Series and not winning the World Series. And you're probably right about that. But is there a couple of things that this team has to tweak to take that next step? Is there a couple of things that they can do to take the next step, going from World Series loser to NLCS loser to back to the playoffs and now winning this time? And you asked the question, is getting Stubbs out of that clubhouse, is that something the Phillies want to deal with? We talked about it before. Brandon Marsh is a guy like, I just don't think you can get Marsh. Is not a, and keep in mind, Marsh not being here kind of coincided a little bit with the slide on this team, right? When Marsh wasn't there in Boston, he wasn't there the first game in Baltimore, although they won that game. Was not having Brandon Marsh around for a week or two contributed to the team kind of sliding a little bit. There's a lot that goes into this, but I think definitely the Phillies are weighing, right? The Phillies are weighing what that next move is, whether it's bringing in a starting level outfielder or tweaking the chemistry or not tweaking the chemistry. In other words, hey, Marchand's a better option than Stubbs, but we are not prepared to move on from Stubbs. Or we can get another outfielder, but we don't want to lose Brandon Marsh and his role on this team. Those are a couple of things that I think the Phillies are going to have to be kind of dealing with over the next month before the trade deadline, which is July 31st. So you have a little bit over a month, but you would imagine this team will be together as constructed, and then JT will come back, and then that will be their next big decision, Marchand or Stubbs, right? And when that team makes that decision, Marchand or Stubbs, they're telling you something, that we think we needed a little bit of a change. We'll see what happens there. I thought about that last night, Marchand going 4 for 4. And when I talked about it when JT got hurt, is Marchand the starting catcher on this team and Stubbs stays in the backup role? And we'll see if that happens tonight. When that lineup comes out, I'll be interested to see who's in the lineup. Is it Marchand or Stubbs? Because after a 4-hit night, it's kind of hard to say, hey, you know what, we're going to sit this guy, but we'll see what the Phillies elect to do. It is a right-handed pitcher tonight, so you could say Stubbs as a lefty, but hey, last night Marchand hit left-handed and had 4 hits in the game. So that's where we kind of start today off, 609-403-0973.
The Marchand question is interesting to me, Mike, because it seems like he works pretty well with Sanchez and Suarez, probably in part because there's no language barrier there. Wheeler's first start with Stubbs, he pitched well. The second, not so much. So it's hard to know how much of that was Wheeler having a bad day at the office, how much of it was Stubbs. I think that if Stubbs is considered a good receiver of the ball overall, I'm assuming they want to keep him up here. I don't know, as of right now, how much he compares to Marshawn, though, for the pitching staff overall.
Yeah, I don't know that we have a big enough sample size there.
Yeah.
Obviously, it will be about another month, I would think, 3 weeks that they can figure this out. But I thought Rafael Marchand, when he came up, we talked about this last week with Frank, I think, too, is that Marchand, it gives you a little bit more offense defensively. Stubbs and Marchand, I don't know that one stands out significantly over the other, but who handles the staff better, we'll see. But I definitely think in a season where you have big picture aspirations, this is going to be an interesting decision that they're going to have to decide whether clubhouse chemistry is more important. Now, Marchand could go 0 for his. I'm not, like David Dahl. I told everybody, hit the brakes on David Dahl. Let's not go crazy and put him back in the All-Star game. But Rafael Marchand, if he keeps, giving you decent offense and playing the position the way that he has, the Phillies are going to have to make a decision. And like last night, he contributes to the win. But if he went 0 for 4, they would have won the game.
Right.
So let's keep that in perspective too. And that's why I say the Phillies might say and value his Stubbs presence in the clubhouse as the backup catcher more than Rafael Marchand, even if Marchand's the better player.
Well, because at least for this clubhouse, the culture in this locker room seems to mean a lot to these guys. The guys have talked about how much they love playing together, how this is their favorite team they've ever played on. It's the best team they ever played on, right? So, for this team, you may need to value the culture and the environment of that clubhouse maybe more than some other teams.
Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. I'm Mike Gill. Hey, whether you're a contractor or a do-it-yourselfer, Progressive Fence and Railing has the region's largest selection of glass rail, cable rail, aluminum, composite, and vinyl. With delivery to your home or job site on time, on budget, or let the pros at Progressive install it for you. They'll help plan your project and get you what you need when you need it. Visit ProgressiveFenceandRail.com or one of their 4 locations. Coming up on a busy Sports Bash, Frank Close, Phillies mailbag at 3 o'clock today. Adam Kaplan has his NFL offseason power rankings for football at 4. And Nicky Earnshaw's back with another edition of Nick's Nuggets here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City and streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
2:29, Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. All right, so a lot of texts coming in. 609-403-0973. Coming up, a scout in the Phillies organization said Aiden Miller is the best prospect since... Wait till you hear. That's coming up. But first, let me get to your text messages. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Mike in EHT says, I think while JT is out, Marchand is the better starting option. But when JT is back, I think you're better off with Stubbs as the backup for his role in the locker room. Backup isn't going to play any important games in the playoffs anyway. That's an interesting point, Mike, because you're right about that. Garrett Stubbs doesn't play in the playoffs ever, right? He never gets any playoff at bats, nothing. So do you just say, look, Stubbs doesn't play. He's a great locker room guy. Just keep him. It's an interesting thought, but I would say this. Maybe Marchand plays the rest of the regular season, and then they make the switch come playoff time and say, hey, we're going to bring Stubbs back. I don't think you could do that, though.
Yeah, I feel like what you're doing is you're trying to remove somebody from the equation and then only make them show up for when it matters the most, when you could argue that them being a part of the formula the entire year is what makes them so valuable. Yeah,
see, that's the conundrum, the catch-22 here.
Yeah.
As Mike in EHT says, Marchand's better, but the backup catcher doesn't play in the playoffs anyway. So you can't just you can't keep Marchand during the season and then switch him for the playoffs. The question is, do they feel like they need an upgrade? That's when the question really becomes. Do they feel they need an upgrade to the backup catcher? Is it that important?
I think the backup catcher is important, but I don't think that upgrading it is necessarily what's wrong with this team right now. I think that, what you saw in the Baltimore series was a lot of guys not getting hits who are being paid a lot of money. I don't think changing the catcher is going to make or break this team from what they have right now. I think that they have shown that they can win games with Real Muto in the lineup and Stubbs as the backup. It's not like when they go to Stubbs, he's a complete loser at life.
Another text says, can you trust this young catcher with Nola, Wheeler, or Suarez? I don't think so, ... yet. Okay, you don't think so yet, but what if he keeps catching over the next month or two, and then you can?
Right, what if he shows over the next month, you're like, wow, this Marchand is a better defensive catcher, and he's a better hitter than Stubbs, Then you got to make a decision. Well, what's more important? The more productive backup. Now, here's the other question, Mike. Flip side. Is Marchand productive because he's getting playing time? Or would he be still productive in a once-in-a-while role?
That's the tough part with the backup catcher always, is they barely play. Well, it's on this team. A lot of backup catchers play a lot more than the backup catcher in Philadelphia.
Sure.
Most backup catchers play 2 to 3 times a week because most teams don't have that all-star stud starting catcher.
Right.
Johnny is listening or watching. He says, we have to keep Brandon Marsh for sure. Yeah, Marsh is another guy in the same conversation. If you go out and get a upgraded outfielder, which has been a lot of the reports, you can't do it at the expense of losing Brandon Marsh.
No, because I think that you saw while Marsh was out that this team had some issues. They had some struggles, and you have to wonder how much of that was a chemistry culture issue. He's obviously a culture guy. Now, he played horrible last night in center field, so maybe he shouldn't be the center fielder.
Cost him.
I mean, if the Phillies didn't win that game last night, Mike, we would be starting this show talking about there's Marsh in center field not getting the job done. That's what we'd be opening the show with.
609-403-0973. Got another text message says, did Stubbs F with the mojo with the whole Arizona pool nonsense in the playoffs? Y'all complained about Schwarber's average last year. Stubbs can play his crappy music and bat 180 with no power for someone else's AAA team. Well, here's the thing. That goes back to what the guy texted in earlier. Stubbs doesn't play in the playoffs anyway.
Right.
So he's not a necessity because JT is going to play every single game. So Stubbs hitting 180 with no power really means nothing come playoff time. He's just here along for the ride. The question is him being in the car important enough to keep him, even if he's not the better player?
I think for this team it is, Mike, because of the fact that I think that this team's chemistry is part of what makes them special.
Yeah.
I think that if you tinker too much with the winning formula, you can mess this thing up. And I think that's what concerns me. This guy who texted in may say, I don't care about him playing the music. Well, maybe the other guys in the locker room care more about the music than you do, and guess what? They're being paid to play baseball.
Yeah, you don't want to hear, what's the song?
Oh, Dancing on My Own?
You don't want to hear Dancing on... Is he the one who came up with that?
I have to double check, but he might have been.
Is he like he is the DJ in the room, right?
Yes, he's the guy who picks all the music.
So, you sure you don't... You want a new song? Is that what you're saying? I don't know, I don't know who picked that song. I don't know who was the one who came up with the Dancing on My Own song, but I know he does. Regardless, is he that important of a player?
It was actually Schwarber who brought Dancing on My Own to the team.
Okay, so then Stubbs is gone. I'm just kidding.
It took that quick. Wow. My God, turn of face.
Here's something for you. We could tie this into the game last night. Did you watch the Celtics last night?
I did.
Yeah.
I
watched the fourth quarter for the most part. I was watching the Phillies, and then I went to the Celtic game, and I just try to take it all in as the Celtics now win their 18th. And here's what I'll take from that game last night. And I see a couple text messages that I will discuss. The last time the Celtics won the title, the Phillies won the World Series. That's the only thing my takeaway is from last night's game.
That's it? That's all you had?
It makes you nauseous that the Celtics win. Now, I like Mazzola. He's a West Virginia guy.
He is.
I like Drew Holiday a lot.
Oh, is there anyone like calmer than Mazzola?
No.
I mean, that dude's heart rate is like low as anybody.
Mazzola was not a great player at WVU, but he was like that guy that was always on the court. Like he wasn't a scorer. He just was the guy on the court all the time, and he didn't do much. You're just like, why? But he's Stubbs. You need him.
You need him.
So the Celtics winning last night. The last time the Celtics won, the Phillies won the World Series.
That's true.
So that's my takeaway from last night. But
so what you're saying is that all we should take from the Celtics winning last night is positive vibes for the Phillies.
Sure. Because text message says, Mike, there's been a debate on your show for years, the Sixers process versus the Celtics rebuild. Well, the debate is finally over. Boston is where the banners hang. You can't argue with the Celtics have had more success. There's no question. Right. Since Joel Embiid has been drafted, the Celtics have ran laps around the Sixers. So while I don't think that, I'm not saying that for me, I think what the Sixers did, I don't have a problem with. The Celtics have just landed better players.
Right.
It's not to say the Celtics, what they did was better. The Sixers could have drafted Tatum. What they did put them in position to get Tatum. They screwed that up. So don't say what the Sixers did was wrong. They were in position to get Tatum, and they messed up. So I don't say what the Sixers did was wrong or that what the Celtics did was better. The Celtics just had better execution. So this isn't like I wouldn't have done the Sixers process or the Celtics rebuild. They both had the same opportunity to get the player who led them, and the Sixers messed it up. Now, the one guy that I think nobody talks about is Jaylen Brown. He was the third pick in the draft. One of the reasons why Boston got Jaylen Brown is because they sucked.
Right, and they got him the year before Tatum.
And the reason they got him because they had the third pick in the draft. They stunk. And they end up getting him, and then they get Tatum. And the Sixers had a chance to get Tatum. So, yes, the Celtics have done whatever has been more successful. But that doesn't limit what the Sixers like. That wouldn't say, oh my God, why did the Sixers do what they did? They did what they did, but they screwed up so many things.
Well, first of all, the Sixers have been through so many GMs, you would think they belong on a Tinder dating app, okay? I mean, they've changed it over again and again. So it's hard to blame an organization that has never finished a plan up until Daryl Morey. But on the flip side, I don't think the reason why Boston won a championship, Mike, last night was because they drafted Tatum and Brown. I think the big story is Brad Stevens letting go of his ego, going to the front office and having somebody else be the head coach. I think that was the big move in the right direction because all of a sudden, once Ime Udoka and then later Joe Mazzulla became the head coach, they got the NBA Finals.
To believe there were people out there who thought Ben Simmons had a higher ceiling than Jason Tatum was a delusional take. I don't know where those two, they were not in the same draft. Simmons and Tatum. It was Fultz and Tatum.
Yeah, Fultz and Tatum. It was Simmons and Brown, I thought it was. Weren't they in the same draft together? Or was Simmons 2015? Let me look it up.
Simmons was 2016. It was Simmons and Brandon Ingram. Was Jaylen Brown the third pick in that draft? I thought that was Ball. Right? I'm pulling it up. Ben Simmons and Tatum were not.
Brown was the third pick that year, correct.
In the Simmons draft.
Right, so it was Simmons, Ingram, Brown.
Okay. So he's saying people thought that Simmons had a higher ceiling than Tatum. I don't know where those comparisons are coming from.
Yeah, they're not in the same draft.
Yeah, it was Fultz and Tatum.
Right, the whole argument was about Brian Colangelo wanted Markelle Fultz. That was the reporting all along. It wasn't that they were like, we want.
Well, to be fair to Colangelo, who I hate. Okay, I don't like Colangelo at all, and I think he was a total boob, and would never have hired him. He wasn't the only one that thought Fultz was the number one. He was pretty much, I don't want to say the consensus number one pick, but about 80% of the pundits thought Fultz was the guy.
But also, Fultz's game fit what the Sixers were trying to do. They needed a guy like Fultz next to Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid.
Yeah. Eddie from Ocean City says the Celtics were always going to draft Tatum even at 1. Yes. The point I'm making is the Sixers traded to 1. They could have taken Tatum, but we know the whole story is they wanted Fultz. But my point is the Sixers were in position to get that player. They just misevaluated the player, as we're talking about.
Correct.
They evaluated Fultz over Tatum, as did many other teams.
Yeah, because again, when you're projecting players, part of projecting them is how do they fit onto my team? You can say a guy might be the best player in the draft, but do you want that guy? Do you need that guy?
609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. You go back to the two teams. The Celtics have absolutely run laps around the Sixers. There is no debating that. They have made so many more decisions as an organization that are better than the Sixers. Making a trade for Porzingis. Remember, they got Drew Holiday right before training camp started last year. That's a Sixer deal, a deal that anybody could have made. The Celtics said, hey, how do we close the deal and go from team that loses in Game 7 to getting over that hump? Let's go get that guy. So you got to give them all the credit in the world.
It goes back to my point about Brad Stevens, though. Brad Stevens is the one that made that move. I don't know if Danny Ainge would have made that move years ago.
Well, it's everything, and I've talked about this before. Sixers fans love blaming Brett Brown. They love blaming Doc Rivers. And I think the Celtics showed you that Brad Stevens said that me as the executive is more important than me as the coach.
Yep.
In other words, the coach isn't as important. Joe Mazzulla, nobody thinks is some great coach. But the executive who put that team together, players over the coach. It's the message that we've given you on this show. Yes, the coach has some meaning. He's not a complete zero. But Brad Stevens was thought to be this great coach. And even he said, I'm not as important as the coach as I could be as the guy who puts the best players together. You got to get the best players. And the Sixers have failed miserably in finding the best players.
And that goes back to the fact that you've gone from Sam Hinkie to Brian Colangelo to who knows who was running a team at one point, to Elton Brand, and now he got demoted and it's Daryl Morey. The Sixers keep changing the guy who's in charge, calling the shots, and the Celtics have had more stability.
Coming up, a scout in the Phillies organization says Aiden Miller is the best prospect they've had since this guy. You'll hear that coming up on the other side, plus why you might not be able to see much of the Phillies and Diamondbacks NLCS rematch this weekend. I got the details on that coming up next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
The Scout the Phillies organization said Aiden Miller is the best prospect we've had since Mike Schmidt.
Yes, he is. And that's my point. If you're going to get, and by the way, if you're the Phillies, if you trade him, you want to get Crochet and Robert, right? You want, but that's what it's going to take.
So that was Steve Phillips, former Mets GM, and Jim Bowden, the former Reds GM, and somebody else. I think he was the Rockies Nationals. They said a scout told them that Aiden Miller is the best prospect the Phillies have had since Mike Schmidt. So the question would be then, would you be willing to move him to upgrade this team with the possibility that you could be losing a player who could have the impact that Mike Schmidt did? 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. When someone says you have a guy who could be your next Mike Schmidt, do you in fact include him in a trade?
I don't think you should, but here's the question, Mike. Where's he going to play? He's playing shortstop at the minor league level. You technically have two shortstops at the major league level.
Mm-hmm.
So he's blocked.
Well, you have really one. I mean, Sosa is signed to one.
No, I'm saying you got Stott and you got Turner.
Well, Stott, I think, is a second baseman now. He's even admitted that. I look at myself as a second baseman, he said.
Okay. Well,
so I don't think, I mean, yes, can he play shortstop? Sure, but he is not in the picture when it comes to this triangle.
Okay, well, still, I mean, Turner is locked in for how many more
Turner
years?
is definitely. So the question would be that when is Miller going to be ready? He is 20 years old. So let's say 3 years from now. All right, you want to call him up? 3 years from now, he's 23 years old. He's at single A now. Let's say he gets the double and then triple, and then maybe he's ready to play 3 years from now. Trey Turner, at that point, you're looking at a guy who might be ready to move positions.
To what position?
He can play the outfield. I mean, he's been a center fielder.
He has.
He can probably play left field. At that point, 3 years from now, he's going to be 34 years old. So do you ask Trey Turner, hey, at some point you're going to have to go play left field because we have this kid who's 23 and our next Mike Schmidt. Now, what's to say that that kid can't play someplace else?
Well, that's the other question. I only see Miller playing shortstop in single A and rookie ball and A+, so I don't see him playing other positions.
Yeah, so far he has only played shortstop up to this point. But if you're telling me I have a player that could be my next Mike Schmidt, guess what? I will find an accommodation. You know what? Generally, the shortstop's the best athlete on the team. They can play another position.
Did he want to play center field? Can he be better than Marsh?
I don't know. I do know that Trey Turner has played center field. So I think 2 or 3 years from now, you can start to think about, much like you did with Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper was playing right field. You preserved him by playing first base. Now, you're saying this is the opposite, but I think playing left field is less strenuous than playing shortstop every day.
100%.
So, now, keep in mind, you also have the possibility that someone could play third base. Now, you might say, what about Alec Bohm? Okay, maybe Alec Bohm is not here anymore. Who knows? I mean, I have no idea what the future holds, and there is a conundrum if you have two players playing the same exact position. However, if you're telling me I have a guy in my organization right now that could be the next Mike Schmidt for me, I have a problem moving him for Luis Robert Jr. That's all.
No, it's very fair, but it's just a question of if you're going to keep him, what are you going to do with him?
That's 3 years down the road. We'll find out.
So you're saying wait and see.
Yes. I'm also saying wait and see because you won't be able to see the Phillies this weekend on Friday on Apple TV Plus, and on Sunday, the game is on Roku. Don't shoot the messenger. Friday night, the game is on Apple TV Plus, and Sunday, the game is on Roku. So you better enjoy the Phillies tonight and tomorrow, because you're not going to get to see the rematch against the Arizona Diamondbacks this weekend. Not happy. Coming up, Frank's Phillies mailbag. I'll ask him about Aiden Miller and his future and his position. That's coming up next on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
3 o'clock, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SB Live. Frank Close covers the Phillies for 97.3 ESPN.com. Set to join us now. His mailbag is open for business every Tuesday here on the show, and we got a lot. We were just talking before you got on. I don't know if you heard the comment from Jim Belden and Steve Phillips. He said Aiden Miller is the best prospect since, we'll play it for you. Here you go.
The Scout of the Phillies organization said Aiden Miller is the best prospect we've had since Mike Schmidt.
Yes, he is. And that's my point. If you're going to get, and by the way, if you're the Phillies, if you trade him, you want to get Crochet and Robert, right? You want, but that's what it's going to take.
All right, Frank, knowing that this guy is being compared to Mike Schmidt, I mean, is he an untouchable player? Let's start there.
I don't think the Phillies need to trade him to accomplish their goals. I think that they would be willing more so to trade maybe a Justin Crawford, who is also a nice offensive prospect that the Phillies have. But if you look at the major deals that have happened over the last few years, the teams that were the acquiring teams didn't trade that much. I think back to even big players moving, like the Nolan Arenados of the world going back a few years. The cost is not a lot in prospects. It seems there's such a premium on prospects right now that the lower level ones can even get you what you need in a trade. So I don't think that the Phillies need to trade Miller. I think he's exceeded their expectations even since he was drafted, especially defensively, because when you consider that he might make it as a shortstop after being drafted as a third baseman, I mean, that bat profiling at shortstop provides so much more value.
Well, that was the question. He's a shortstop. You obviously have a shortstop for the next 10 years. Obviously that's something way down the line here, but you got a prospect of that. Does that make you more or less likely to trade him? And do you see that Turner's time at shortstop is on, the sand is going through the hourglass there?
I think you'll worry about it later when you have to.
Yeah. I know it's way cart before the horse here, but hearing that bite and knowing you're going to be in a trade situation where you might have to make a decision if you want what level of player you want back in return if his name comes up.
I don't really think that Dave Dombrowski is the type to go broke for a big name in a trade. I feel like his trades tend to be a lot more measured. They tend to be very tuned in to exactly what they need. Will he ever make a big splash? And has he ever in the past? Yes, he has. But I just don't see him needing to or really desiring to. I think that, his MO when he came to this organization was to rebuild on the fly, aka add a bunch of talent while at the same time allowing your farm system to restock. Right now, you can actually look at this farm system and say they are pretty nicely stocked. And when you are nicely stocked, you don't have to trade your best prospects to make a deal. So I don't expect him to.
All right, let's quickly get into tonight's lineup. It's brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage, located in Rio Grande. Moving's a breeze with Clark's Moving and Storage. Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm, Stott, Castellanos, March, Pache, Stubbs, and Nola. So that's interesting. I was wondering if they were going to go with Marchand again after a 4-for-4 night. He is sitting tonight. Pache is in center. Marsh goes back to left field. So you thought Marsh and Pache could be the platoon in center, and then Dahl and Whit Merrifield in left, but no, Marsh and Pache both in the lineup tonight, Frank.
Well, they might be going for a little bit of defense here first, and I think this is their best defensive alignment. If you put Marsh in center field, and by the way, he is far from a butcher in center field. I think I think it's fair to say he's above average, maybe not extraordinary in center field. But I think when he's in left and Pache is in center, that is a really nice defensive alignment. And when you consider Castellanos in right, I mean, the center fielder has been making up a little extra ground there. And then, I think I said this a few times before, that the center fielder can play further towards the right fielder, and then the left fielder with a little bit more mobility on both sides can play in a little bit too. So I really do like this as a defensive alignment. I think that's what they're going for here. And let's be honest too, both David Dahl and Whit Merrifield have not exactly been tearing the cover off the ball either. So I think that this is mainly a defensive arrangement that they're looking for here.
Yeah, and obviously Rojas went down. You lose that defense from center field there, but you got Pache playing center tonight, Marsh playing left. Marsh had the error in center field last night, kind of misplayed a ball there. There's your Phillies lineup for tonight. Pitching matchup, it is Aaron Nola versus Michael King. You saw 18 hits last night. Phillies looking to continue with that. Good night from Bohm, good night from Schwarber, good night from Harper, good night from almost everybody last night. But let's get into the mailbag questions here. How realistic is Luis Robert Jr. to the Phillies? His name keeps coming up. You just heard it in that bite from Jim Bowden. He mentioned that, if they're going to, trade a guy like Aiden Miller, you might want multiple players in that deal. But no Rojas here anymore. Are the signs pointing to Luis Robert Jr.?
So the question is it realistic? I mean, here's what I can take from this situation. One, it's realistic the Phillies are shopping for an outfielder. I think there's enough smoke there to know that the Phillies are indeed engaged in the outfield market. Is it realistic that the Phillies would trade what it takes to get somebody like Luis Robert Jr.? That's where I kind of don't know. I have a few reservations on Robert Jr. And I know I'm not in the majority here. This is a guy, if you look at his history, prior to the 2020 season, they did what the Phillies had just done a couple years prior with Scott Kingery and signed him to a $50 million deal that'll take him through his 6 seasons of Major League ball. And then they added a couple option years onto it to make it maybe worth about $88 million, I believe is the number. But he has not overwhelmed in the major league so far. I mean, you're looking at a guy that's battled injury after injury this year. I think it might have even happened during the Phillies series or shortly thereafter was this year's most recent injury. But he's got a long injury history. And really last year, 2023 was his really good year. He did make the AL All-Star team. He actually got injured during the home run derby. That was one of his injuries from last year. But he doesn't have that big a track record. He was always considered a premium prospect, but his problem has been staying healthy. His problem has been putting up those numbers that you would have expected him to put up like he did last year. Now, the Phillies certainly know those types of deals with Scott Kingery. They know the Dominic Brown type surges that disappear afterwards. I think he's better than Dominic Brown, but I have just enough reservations about him to think that he might not be worth that type of premium prospect package. Now Jim Bowden, he recommended, putting a package together and getting the White Sox best pitcher right now as well. That's what that was about. But I don't know. I don't know if the Phillies need to do that double trade. I feel like a trade for Luis Robert Jr. would cost too much. And then if he's injured, well, then what? So he's not a name that I particularly would like to see in Philadelphia. I have just enough concerns that I don't think it's a good idea. But, is it out in the realm of possibility? Of course. I mean, the Phillies are shopping. Maybe the White Sox certainly are understanding of everything I just said, and maybe their price comes down.
Well, yeah, you threw in there. He threw in Garrett Crochet as well, who's having a great year. He might as well be Steve Carlton on that team.
Right.
They're 19-54, and he's got 6 of their 19 wins. His WHIP is 0.90. If you could add that level of pitcher, the question would be, when would he even pitch in a playoff series? I mean, really, your top 3 are going. You only need the 4th guy maybe twice in the entire playoff round. So that would almost be like an embarrassment of riches.
It would. And I'm not beyond what the Phillies did in 2011, which was have that embarrassment of riches, but if I'm the White Sox, I'm not packaging them in the same trade. I'm selling them separately because any pitcher pitching like that in Major League Baseball is going to get a boatload back in return. And so if you're going to package him with your other perhaps top asset that you can convert into some prospect capital, you really want to separate them out to get the best bang for your buck. So I don't really see a package like that happening. And if you're the Phillies, and as you said, they kind of are covered in that department for the most part. Again, never turn down really good pitching if it falls into your lap. But I feel like they're covered enough there that they want to use their resources best as possible to really address the area that we've just been talking about, which is outfield. And yeah, there's probably room for a reliever out there as well, of which we don't really know which one yet. That it might be available, but I think I think that if you're the Phillies, you focus on those needs. Certainly, Crochet would be welcome anywhere, though.
All right, let's get to another question in the mailbag from Vince. He wants to know why Rojas was the guy sent down. Did he really do much different than what the Phillies anticipated?
I think a lot of people were focusing on the bat here because I feel like there were enough quotes during spring trading along the lines of, well, if he could hit 230, then the Phillies will be fine. But I think a few things have happened that have really kind of changed that situation. And the first was, when you got back from England, the Phillies were without their starting catcher. They were without their starting left fielder, Brandon Marsh. And they were also down Trey Turner at the same time. But when you have all three of them, you just can't shove somebody like Rojas down in the 9th spot and then not worry about it. Why? Because that offensive gap became a little bit too large. I don't know if you noticed, Mike, some of those lineups in the last week, you look at 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you're like, where's that offense going to come from? So I think there started to be some exposure there. I thought when I got to Baltimore on Friday and Pache was in there in center, it was like, okay, I see what's happening here. They're going to try to get some more offense out of here. But then what also happened on Friday night, I think really led into this situation too, is that they brought in Rojas to pinch run, gets a really bad jump, doesn't score what should have been the winning run for the night, right? And so they ultimately came back and won that game. But I think you got to the point there where it's like, okay, all right, his bat is not good, relatively speaking. Well, really, if you look at his OPS, it's like one of the top 10 bottom in the league. If you look at OPS for starters in the major leagues, but you can't withstand that anymore with people injured, especially now without Real Muto, who's one of the better offensive catchers in the league. And if he can't get that speed right, Scott Lauber today in the Philadelphia Inquirer was also pointing out that, besides the base running mistake I mentioned, he's not really bunting either. So if he's not using his speed, if he's not hitting, then maybe it's time that you go down to AAA and work on those things. Aside of all of that, this is no great victory in my mind for the Christian Paches or David Dahls of the world, or even Whit Merrifield. Those guys are probably still in the hot seat too. One of them's not going to be there when the Phillies go get an outfielder. But I think right now it's about getting
Do you
Rojas.
think we've seen the last of Rojas this season?
No. I think I can say that confidently. Honestly, unless he goes away in a trade, which is not out of the realm of possibility either. If they can get somebody a little bit more established in center field, and then Rojas has to go back to make the trade happen, I would understand that for sure. Mm-hmm. But I feel like someone like that, if you get his speed right, you can bring him in as either a defensive replacement or a pinch runner, even if you do get an additional outfielder down the line. So he's somebody who could help you down the line. He's got to get that base running right. He's got to learn how to bunt. He's got to use that speed that he has. And by the way, I did also notice too that defensively, he only has one defensive run saved this year, which is actually, when you say that, you don't want to say that that's bad, but I mean, what were you expecting of a guy like that? Last year, I think he finished with like 18 or something, and he didn't play much more than he played this year. So to get to that number 18. So I think he needs a little bit of a tune-up, and so going to AAA is probably the best thing no matter what.
All right, Frank Close, 97.3 ESPN.com, Phillies Insider, taking a look at the mailbag this week. There's a lot there in that outfield because you mentioned Dahl, Merrifield, Pache, Marsh. Still decisions need to be made. A lot of rumors around that they're looking to add a starting level outfielder. So we'll see what they end up doing in that spot. The other position, Mickey says, do they need to get another catcher ahead of the deadline? Now, this is interesting because there's a lot of, Marchand 4 hits last night. I think we talked about it, maybe it was you last week, is Marchand the guy that should get the playing time and Stubbs stay in the role? Now, Stubbs is in the lineup tonight, but some are wondering, do you keep Marchand when Real Muto is ready to return? The question Mickey wants to know is, do you need to look at a upgrade at the backup catcher position? Another thought is they don't use the backup catcher in the playoffs anyway.
Yeah, that's very, very true, Mike. I mean, the backup catcher gets the least amount of attention in the playoff series, but, I think the Phillies have some time here to figure out what to do. Now, what I said last week was, if you looked at Stubbs' record behind the plate as the backstop, not as the one at the plate hitting, he profiled very, very strongly. He worked really well with the pitchers. He knows the pitching staff. And I think that as of last week, they were 10-4 in games that Garrett Stubbs started behind the plate. Now, when Marchand, as they start to mix him in, you'll notice that he caught Christopher Sanchez twice. Why would that be a good idea? Well, Marchand has worked with him in the minor leagues even the last couple of years. So they're familiar with each other, right? So I think the key right now is to get Marchand really used to the pitching staff that's here. One thing that worked against him this year was that he did not have spring training to work with this pitching staff, and that back injury, a lower back injury going into spring training, and he got healthy just in time because it was only a couple weeks ago that he was actually activated and then optioned to AAA, and then the Real Muto injury hit. So what I think you want to see is, can Marchand get comfortable with the staff? I think what we've seen of him in the past. Now, interestingly, he was up in 2020 and 2021, but you didn't see him in 22 or 23. That has a lot to do with not so much him, but the fact that the Phillies' 2 catchers did not get injured either of those 2 years, which is pretty fascinating in a whole season that neither catcher has any type of nagging injury. But I think Marchand showed you a lot last night, throwing out Kim at second base, the talented infielder for the Padres. I think he's successful more than he's not when he attempts a stolen base, and I thought that was a convincing throw to second base last night. So I think you want to see what he's got here. What will that mean down the stretch? Now, Marchand does have a minor league option this year that the Phillies can send him back and forth as they need to. So not a bad guy to have stashed to AAA if Real Muto's back and healthy and Garrett Stubbs is healthy. But then, I think the bigger question will be for next year, is Marchand ready to rise up to the majors and be that backup? And I think he's going to determine a lot of that right now during this window of opportunity that he has. Now, Mike, if both he and Stubbs are a disaster, I don't expect them to be, or if he and Stubbs, one of them gets injured too, I think then the Phillies need to absolutely go out and get somebody. But I think for now, this is a really good window of opportunity to see what he can give this Phillies team.
Well, and I guess the question, even if Marchand comes up and he hits 350 and he's rocking and rolling, is Stubbs that important in the clubhouse to say, listen, we don't want to, rock that boat because the backup catcher's not playing anyway?
Yeah, put it this way. If it comes down to, do they get rid of one or the other at any point this season before the playoffs? I say no. I think that Marchand will be a AAA and Stubbs will be the backup catcher through the playoffs. If everybody is healthy and all is going well, then maybe next year Marchand could take that role. I would not be shocked if he did take that role after this year. But you're right. Stubbs is a very beloved player in the Phillies clubhouse. Brings a lot of energy to the team. Well liked. I don't think that's something you want to mess with necessarily. But again, overall, he works really well with these pitchers.
Yeah, no, I that's a tough balance there because I think everybody could say that Marchand's got such a small sample size, but is he a better overall player, catcher, hitter, everything than Stubbs? We'll find out, but it might not matter, is what you're saying.
Won't matter for this year anyway. Will it make a difference heading into next year? Very possibly. But yeah, I do. If you're asking me personally, I think Marchand grades out better overall. I personally like to see a backup catcher be a switch hitter because it gives you some options. You don't have to worry about playing matchups, when you want to give your starting catcher a rest, which should be on his body's time, not based upon who the opposing starting pitcher is.
Yeah, that's another good point, is that Stubbs only hits left-handed. Marchand is a switch hitter, so you can play him. A lot of times you'll see the backup catcher play on Sunday, the day game after the night game. Sometimes, though, if there is a left-handed pitcher on Sunday, you don't want Stubbs to have to be in that game. If not, a lot of stuff between now and then. Good to see the Phillies get going last night. Trey Turner's return kind of changes it. It's interesting how sometimes one guy pushes that lineup down and it changes everything. Yeah,
Nick Castellanos' bat decided to wake up again after going 0-for in that Baltimore series in the 2 spot. I mean, you couldn't have that. It didn't seem like a good fit. But at the same time, the other options they had, if let's say Bryson Stott, if you were going to put him second where he has hit a couple times, then you'd have 3 lefties in a row. And then, the bullpen is just ready to line up and do that. So I think that was a lefty righty thing that happened before. And this really puts that lineup a lot better balanced. Not just for the starting pitcher of the day, but when they bring in the relievers later in the game.
Frank Close, everybody, 97.3 ESPN.com, Phillies and the Padres. It's Nola and Michael King tonight for San Diego as that game at Citizens Bank Park. By the way, Friday night, Apple TV Plus, Sunday, the game's on Roku. So you might not get to see a lot of those Phils this weekend as the rematch with the Diamondbacks, who were playing a lot better baseball, by the way.
Yeah, you expected them to be better than they were. I mean, you don't go to the World Series and then completely fall flat on your face. But no, the Diamondbacks are still a force to be reckoned with. And I think Phillies fans will remember that playoff series last year, this weekend in Philadelphia. By the way, Friday night is also the Cole Hamels retirement celebration too. So be a lot of Phillies fans down there with a lot of memories of the NLCS, and I think it'll be a pretty exciting atmosphere this weekend.
Yeah, Arizona working its way up the wild card race there, just a half a game out of the wild card spot right now. So it's a big weekend coming up, but the Padres are here now, who are also a half game out of the NL wild card race. In fact, everybody seems to be a half game out of the NL wild card race. That's including the Mets, who are just 1 game out of the National League wild card. Frank, we will talk to you next week, pal.
Sounds great, Mike.
All right, Frank Close, everybody, 97.3 ESPN.com, Phillies Insider. Of course, the Phillies tonight as they take on the Padres. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. We got so much more to dive into today. It's been a fun show so far. We have a new NBA champion. It's the Boston Celtics. I know, get nauseous. But can we get a new Super Bowl champion? One reason why I think the Eagles are in for a good season. Maybe not a good season, maybe a great season. That's next. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City and streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive. It's sponsored this hour by Broadlee's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning, your trusted source for heating, plumbing service for generations. Call them at 609-390-3907, online at broadlees.net. The Eagles could be in for a great season. I'll tell you why next on the Sports Bash.
It's for the ones who know safety isn't a catchphrase, it's a culture. And the ones who help make sure everyone makes it home safe. For the safety-minded who watch everyone's backs, Grainger offers supplies and solutions for every industry, as well as safety assessments and training to keep your facilities safe and your people safer. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
With Mike Gill.
Keeping the fans entertained and happy.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
3:30 on a Sports Bash Tuesday. Frank Close, our Phillies insider, to stop by, answered some of your Phillies mailbag questions. If you have more Phillies thoughts or any others, you can text us at 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. For those of you who are watching on the X platform at 973 ESPN, use the hashtag SBLive. We appreciate you chiming in. We got a lot of people watching today. I will say this to the people watching today. You saw the lineup today. We placed the graphic up on the screen, and you saw Marsh and Pache both in the lineup today. We had heard a lot about them platooning in center field. Well, they're both in the lineup today. No Merrifield and no Dahl in the lineup today for the Phillies. And, of course, we'll talk more about that a little bit later on in the show. Eagles thoughts here. So I was thinking about this today. As everybody's doing their off-season grades and this, and ESPN.com gave the Eagles an A. And here's something I thought about. The Eagles, listen, it's a downtime in football. I get it. But we talked about this yesterday. You're about a month to training camp now, okay? Something crossed my mind as to why I think this team might be better this year. Are you intrigued by this?
I'm intrigued. I want to see where you're going with this. I'm listening. I want to see where this, where you take us on this road here.
I don't think you could discount the team approaching its own players like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata. They all got new deals. The team went out of their way to tell those guys, we want you here. And that might not seem like a big deal, but who knows what A.J. Brown was thinking last year. Is this my last year here? Do they want me to come back? There was a lot of conversation. Are they going to trade him? And the Eagles squashed all of that. They got Smith and said, we want you here. And I don't think you can discount when the team goes to you. You know, when you have to go to your boss and ask for a raise, the anxiety builds up. Like, I have to go ask for more money, right? A good company identifies people, and they go to those people and say, we value you, and we're going to give you more money. The Eagles, they did that. They said to Brown, they said to Smith, they said to Dickerson, they said to Mailata, we value you, and we're going to give you more money. Those guys are pretty key players on this team, are they not?
Yes.
So when they did it to the quarterback last offseason, I'm not suggesting there's animosity, but the guys have to be thinking, why him, not me? And this year, it's not why him, not me, because they all got it. Brown can't say why Smith and not me. Brown and Smith both got a new deal. Mailata can't say, well, why Dickerson and not me? They both got a new deal. The Eagles did a really good job of making sure everybody was taken care of and everybody was happy. And I know sometimes we just kind of overlook these things. But I think those offseason decisions that the Eagles made, they identified young players on their team and made sure that they didn't come back to training camp with any issues. And so many times we hear about problems. So what did the Eagles do? They got rid of a problem. And to some extent, some people think they upgraded. Now, I don't know if Bryce Huff is going to be better than Hassan Reddick, but some people like Huff better than they like Reddick, and you got a third-round pick. So they said, you know what? We're not going to take the chance that Hassan Reddick wants more money. We don't intend to sign him to the money, so let's upgrade there, or let's swap it out. They took care of almost all the issues that they had monetarily. They identified the players that might be malcontent a little bit if they didn't get the money. I don't think Mailata would care. I don't know Dickerson's personality well enough. But, man, the Eagles did what a lot of companies don't do. They went out and identified the people that they valued and said, we value you. We want you here. Here's more money. What a novel idea. And the Eagles took care of business. And I think that's something that hasn't been discussed all that much. As I thought about that today was they're doing these off-season grades, and I'm reading like, okay, best move, extending A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And I said, you know what? That's an underrated thing. Like, that jumped off the page as I was reading that. And then you take a look at some of the other things. You know, the Eagles worked out extensions with Brown and Smith, and then you went out and got 2 players on your offensive line, and I feel like those type of things get swept under the rug so many times when you're talking about the changes or additions you make, because sometimes re-signing your own players isn't as sexy as going out and getting somebody new.
No, but it goes back to the conversation we had the last hour about the Phillies, Mike. It's the idea that you are cultivating an environment. Remember Saquon Barkley said, I walked into this building and I saw the way they talked about last season and how they looked at football. He says, I want to be here. You know, Jalen Hurts complimented Howie Roseman this offseason. Howie's bringing guys in who fit the culture of this building. You have to say that, you know, maybe like with the Phillies, the Eagles are saying, look, we know what we have, and we are going to keep what we have going because we see value in those people and cultivating that environment.
Well, the Eagles also told you that we don't think the players that we identified were part of the problem last year, right? Yeah, we had this crazy ending to the season that nobody can quite put their thumb on, and nobody has had something quite like it. But those 4 guys that I just mentioned, AJ, Smith, Mailata, and Dickerson, they had nothing to do with that.
Right.
They are part of why we were 10-1, not part of why we were 1-6 over the last 7. A couple text messages, 609-403-0973. Yes, the Eagles could have a great season, but I've never seen a team that is supposed to be good have so many questions at virtually every position group. Well, let's see this here. Questions at every position group. I don't think they have questions at tackle.
Do they have questions at receiver?
I don't think they have questions at outside receiver, maybe in the slot.
Okay, if you want to nitpick.
Okay. I don't think they have questions at left guard, maybe at right guard. That's fair.
That's fair.
And I think center's fair to say that's a question.
Yes.
Your starting tight end is not a question. I think the backup tight end is a question, but
again, if you're digging deep into the roster, I think you could find questions, though, in every roster, right?
Well, he's saying for a team that is supposed to be good. Like, for instance, we've talked a lot about these rankings in the offseason. Pro Football Focus and others have the Eagles ranked as a top 3 roster in the NFL.
Right, the 33rd team.
33rd team had him number 2.
Right.
So he's basically, and so far I disagree with tackle. I don't think they have questions there. Left guard, I don't think they have questions there. I don't think they have questions at outside wide receiver. I don't think they have questions at starting tight end. I don't think they have questions at running back, maybe the depth in the running back room if you want to nitpick there. I don't think they have questions at defensive tackle. I mean, I like the tackle room. It's just you're losing Fletcher Cox, but I still like the guys that are there.
Right.
Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, Bryce Young, the edge rushers, are they questioned? Bryce, what did I say, Bryce Young?
Bryce Young.
The quarterback, he stinks. Now that's a question. You have questions at linebacker, that's fair. I mean, you have questions at corner, but I would think someone will emerge from that group.
Right. And then you did sign C.J. Gardner-Johnson for safety. I think that answers a question.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, look, everybody has – the Chiefs have a lot of questions that get answered by Mahomes.
See, this is the problem I have with people like that texter, because it's like you can go through every roster and nitpick if you wanted to.
Yeah, you can go through almost –
So why are we singling out the Eagles as the only good team that we can nitpick the roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say every team in the league has some sort of roster questions that, look, the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't think have the best roster. I think they have the best quarterback. He erases a lot of their problems.
And the best coach, you could argue.
609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. By the way, Adam Kaplan will do his off-season power rankings coming up for Football at 4 today. That's based off the conversation we had last week about the rosters.
That made me chuckle. For those who didn't hear it on Friday, Adam literally interrupted the segment and said, you know what, Mike, what we're going to do on Tuesday? This is what we're going to do. You were just like, all right, coming up on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think the nitpicking of every roster is easy to do, especially this time of the year. Especially this time of the year where you're like, how can you get better? What can you get better? I think the Eagles certainly have questions. That's not what we're saying. But, when you're talking about...
But you're talking about the fact that this organization has identified, hey, we believe in these people. We want to take care of our guys. We want to go to A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Landon Dickerson. We want to go to these guys and say, we respect you, we value you, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is. And that cultivates a positive work environment in Philadelphia.
And one thing too, like another thing to add to that, they wrote extending A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I would also add Mailata and Dickerson to that. He also says the move that he likes, swapping Reddick for Huff and then getting the third-round pick. He said the move he disliked was Saquon Barkley for 26 fully guaranteed. I would have to imagine it's the money that's the problem there, not getting Barkley.
Right. I don't think literally Barkley is the problem, but I think there are plenty of people out there who look at the money, the dollar figure, and they cringe a little bit, right?
Definitely. The $26 million for a running back, I think, is fair to add to the mix. Mike, I'm telling you, the Eagles need a second tight end that can block and make tough catches across the middle. That or a good blocking possession type number 3 wide receiver. Yeah, I agree. That they could use a better second tight end. That was one of the areas that we mentioned that, they probably could use an upgrade in second tight end. That blocking possession third receiver seemingly has been a problem for them for, the last time they had a good number 3, I think anyway, was the year that Aguilar played the slot. He was very good in the slot the year they won the Super Bowl.
He was very good, and that team was very good at knowing their roles. Everybody played their role to a T.
If they can find an upgrade at that slot wide receiver, yes, you would feel better entering camp or at some point during camp.
Well, it's certainly possible as well. You know how teams are, Mike. They release guys throughout camp. So there might be a guy on another team right now.
If I were to ask everybody out there right now, do you feel confident that they will have somebody else playing slot third wide receiver when the season starts? Or is that guy on this team?
I think my guy might not be on the team right now.
609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Coming up today at Football at 4, Adam Kaplan's first power rankings of the season. He based these rankings on the quality of roster, overall depth, offense and defensive schemes, and quality of coaching. So when you hear his top, we got 14. He ranked the top 14 teams on his list. That's coming up today for Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. I also, like the fact that Philadelphia has, on the defensive side of the ball, so much competition in that secondary. You got all those corners, as we've talked a lot about. There's so much competition. To me, brings out the best in everybody. So you're going to get better efforts, and I don't want to say efforts, not effort in the way that you're trying harder, meaning you're going to get the best out of all those guys because they know that every rep that is being taken that they're not in, that guy has a legitimate shot at taking a position because those guys have all played. They've all had the opportunity to get on the field. And the Eagles like generally everybody in that room. I've never seen. Now, some of those guys we might find out, you hear a lot about, and you're like, they like this guy, that he can't really play. We might get to that point, but I think the Eagles are genuinely, that's a tough word for me. Oh,
genuinely?
Man, yeah, it's a hard word for me. Some words are just hard for people. That one's one of them. Genuinely. Was that right?
Genuinely.
Did I say it right?
You were very close.
Genuinely.
There you go.
I think that's what I said the last time.
Well, it's not like kind of almost like genuinely.
No, I don't think I said anything close to that.
You don't
Replay
think so?
that. No, I don't think so. Whatever you said was not close to anything that came out of my mouth.
You want to say the words that come out of my mouth?
I did maybe say it off, but what you said was way off. I think they definitely like, I can name, Slay, obviously they like.
Yes.
Who's the other guy? Mitchell? Okay, they like him. Cooper DeJean, they obviously like him. What are they going to do with him? Zach McPherson, remember, he's been here a while. Do they like him or not? Ringo, I think they like him. Isaiah Rodgers, I mean, there's a lot of people think that he was the star of the minicamp. Now, that doesn't mean anything, but they obviously would like him. Josh Jobe, Eli Ricks. I mean, there's a lot of guys who probably aren't even on the depth chart because the depth chart keeps going that they like and aren't on this depth chart. So, I don't know. That's a good problem to have, competition. Matt and Kate May says, Mike, I hear about the third wide receiver position, but are we sure, or how sure are we about right guard? I think that right guard thing is very intriguing, Matt. Fair. I also say this about the right guard position. The Eagles have 3 very good players. I don't know about Juergens. I'm not going to throw him into the mix, okay? I don't know anything about what to expect from him at safety. But most teams at center. But most teams only have 1 or 2 good offensive. We've been so spoiled with the Eagles having 5 good players. The right guard spot, you just might have to come to terms with. It might just be average this year. And if you get good play, you're lucky. I mean, most teams, you play against Minnesota. Oh, I love Justin Jefferson. I love Dalvin Cook. Yeah, but you don't like any of their offensive linemen. The Eagles, you like all 5 offensive linemen. Oh, and A.J. Brown and Smith and Barkley and Goddard. So you might have to say, hey, the right guard spot might be a step back from what we're used to. And do I know if that's okay? I don't know if that's okay. But I think there's some interesting competition, much like the safety corner room. I think you got Steen. You got Hennessy, who's been there before. You've got now Becton, who's now thrown into this mix. So you have those 3 guys, and they just signed the other guy, who's Max Sharping. He's another guy who has had starting snaps in this league. So I think they have enough competition to get good play, maybe not great play from that spot, but keep that all in mind. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive. Football at 4 is coming up. On the other side, the Celtics have won the championship, but are they the favorite to repeat next year? And how about the teams that Philadelphia is favored over? What's the messaging there? That's next. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.
You're listening.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
With Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
On 97.3 ESPN.
3:53 on a Sports Bash Tuesday. This hour brought to you by Broadlee's Heating, Air Conditioning, 609-390-3907, online broadlees.net. So the favorite to win the title next year, according to the Vegas odds at BetOnline, Boston is the favorite 3-1. You have a problem with that? No.
I don't think you have a problem with it. It's pretty logical.
Denver's second, 7-1.
It's a little high.
Dallas is 8-1.
Not surprising.
Minnesota 9-1.
Should be higher.
Oklahoma 9-1.
Should be higher.
Milwaukee 10-1.
A little high.
Philadelphia 14-1. They have 2 players on the roster.
They do, but it sounds about right considering it's Daryl Morey, the GM.
So they're ahead of the Knicks. They're ahead of the Lakers. They're ahead of the Suns. They're ahead of the Warriors. They're ahead of the Clippers.
The only team on that list you just mentioned who could maybe be ahead of the Sixers are the Knicks.
They're ahead of Miami. They're ahead of Cleveland. They're ahead of Indiana. They're ahead of Orlando, Sacramento, New Orleans. I mean, I was a little surprised that Philadelphia came in on the list where they actually did. They're number 7, and they lost to the Knicks, and yet they're higher than them to win the title next year.
The Knicks are the only one that surprises me, like you said.
What about the Clippers?
Clippers are a mess.
Miami
doesn't know what they're doing right now. Indiana's going to re-sign Siakam.
50-1 on Indiana.
That's too low for me.
Philadelphia 14-1. By the way, it was Boston And then it was 4 straight Western Conference teams before a run of 3 straight Eastern Conference teams.
That's fair.
All right, put your money down now. 14-1. Philadelphia's going to be a big offseason. That's what the numbers say there. Coming up, Adam Kaplan's first power rankings of the offseason. Who does he like in the top 10? Find out next on Football on the Sports Bash.
Jersey 97.3 ESPN presents the Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Adam Kaplan, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I give my heart and soul to this franchise, as so many of us do.
Now live, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Adam Kaplan is here. It is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Adam Kaplan, host of the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms and their YouTube channel with great content. Just search Inside the Birds, including Football at 4. Adam Kaplan is here. We had a good conversation last week. The 33rd team had the Eagles roster 53, ranked number 2 overall in the entire NFL. So Adam went ahead and ranked them himself based on a myriad of things. I'll let him discuss that as we take a look at Adam's first power rankings of the 2024 offseason. What's going on, Adam Kaplan?
Yeah, so Mike, basically what I did is I took our conversation last Friday, and I'm like, I'm not just going to do rosters. Anyone could look at a depth chart. I could get my wife to do it. It's not hard to do. But no, because that's the easiest thing. But do you know about coaching? Do you know about offensive defensive schemes which are tied into coaching? The roster depth of 32 teams. I look at all that stuff. That's so important to me because that's how you tell, who are the breakout teams. When I had the Lions as my breakout team last season, and I really was high on them the year before, I knew the staff is phenomenal that Dan Campbell put together. They were also a good front office. I'm not really putting the front office rankings in here or adding there because they have nothing to do with the coaching staff or they're not coaching and they're not playing. So they don't have anything to do with it, but it's everything that has to do with on the field. We're talking about the roster, the depth, and the coaching, and the schemes, and how they're implemented. I cannot tell you how important it is to have a quality coaching staff. Yes, players are number one, but 1A, and it's believe me, it's really close. You cannot win a Super Bowl without great coaching. You just can't. I don't care what anybody says. This is based on 28 years of covering this business and closely for 25. I've learned my lesson in kind of undervaluing coaching sometimes. Joe Banner, our friend who used to be the Eagles president, Mike, really explained to me in our discussions, I've had hundreds of them with Joe, and how important coaching is. And he lived it. He lived it with Andy Reid, a guy who had never even been a coordinator for the Packers, and that was a hell of a hire by Joe. That was Joe and Jeffrey Lurie doing that, and it's not easy to find stuff like that, but leadership and coaching and the value of implementation of schemes and so forth, really, really important.
Yeah, and a lot of these teams, you take a look at what they're going to be this season, how much coaching factors in. We'll take a look at your power rankings. We'll start towards the bottom and work our way up because you look at Buffalo at number 14 on your list, Adam. That's a team, a coaching staff that has been together right there with Sean McDermott, but a lot of changes to that roster.
Well, actually, Mike, he's lost. In fact, remember, he fired his offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey, last season, and Joe Brady took over, and Joe Brady kept the job. He named Bobby Babich a first-time defensive coordinator. His dad, Bob Babich, was a linebackers coach for the Bills under McDermott. He retired a couple years ago. Sean's actually gone through a bunch of changes on his staff over the last couple of years, but he's got the quarterback, Josh Allen. Now, the reason why I picked, just so you know, only 14 teams in this ranking, because we now have, since 2020, 7 teams make it on each conference and not 6. So we were up from 12 to 14 teams. So Buffalo, Mike, they're just not as good. You mentioned the roster changes, you're right. They're going to have a completely new starting receiver corps. In fact, the only returning receiver of their top projected players on the roster is Khalil Shakir, should be the 3. Keon Coleman, the second-round pick, is new. Curtis Samuel is new. Mac Hollins is new, former Eagle. MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is new. Chase Claypool is new. They have a completely new wide receiver group here, and that's part of it. Defensively, they don't have a very good pass rush. They're also, Mike, going to have a minimum of new starters in the secondary. Definitely 2 new starting safeties. That's without question. Rasul Douglas, another former Eagle, should be starting at one corner spot. They'll figure it out on the other side. Could be Christian Benford, a former Villanova corner, who started a bit last season. But they're going through a lot of changes, Mike, and there's change in Buffalo. That's why I've got them at 14.
All right, a team that, man, Super Bowl and then no playoffs with some injuries there for Cincinnati last year. But this is a team that a lot of people still like.
Yeah, I got the Bengals at 13. Joe Burrow is healthy. He's over his wrist injury and everything that's happened to him. You know, he's had an ACL. This is the thing you worry about is he's missed so much off-season time over the years because of he's come back from injuries. You worry about that, but he's going to have T. Higgins. He's not going anywhere. As I told people in every interview I've had this offseason, I'm like, he's not going to be traded. No one's going to trade for him. They're not going to pay him what he wants. The Bengals don't like trades. They don't like making trades. They finally made a move on Joe Mixon. They want to get younger there at running back, but they just don't like talking to other teams. I'm like, they don't like making trades. They're very old school with Mike Brown, the owner. So when you really look at it, Mike, Zach Taylor's back. Press Taylor's brother, his older brother. They're going to have a new offensive coordinator. Dan Pitcher was their quarterback's coach. Lou Anarumo is back as a D coordinator. Darren Simmons is a really underrated special teams coach is back. You like that. They've got some continuity. Certainly in their coaching staff, but their offensive line's below average. They spent a first-round pick, and Amarius Mims is more of a project. He probably won't start year one. He'll definitely be a future left tackle. That's where he projects to be. He could play either, but he should be a left tackle down the road. But Orlando Brown Jr. is going to be a left tackle. They're not very good inside. They've got some guys who want contract extensions. We mentioned T. Higgins. And then Trey Hendrickson wants his deal done. He's not going anywhere. They're not looking to get worse. He wants more money. They're going to have. They're revamping their secondary a little bit, Mike. This is going to be a good team. I just don't like that Joe Burrow is missing time. I mean, we're not practicing a lot in the offseason. And by the way, Zach Moss, who was terrific filling in for Jonathan Taylor at running back with the Colts, he's a grinding type back, not explosive, not a playmaker. That's a downgrade from Joe Mixon. I think he's a full-time starter. I think it's crazy. Chase Brown, his brother's out sitting with the Eagles, his twin brother. He'll back him up. But overall, this is a good, not great team. I've got them at 13. They're in, by the way, the best division in the National Football League, the AFC North.
Yes, which is going to be featured on the Hard Knocks, by the way, the entire division. Number 12, this one's interesting. Jacksonville. They're kind of the Eagles of the AFC. Got off to a great start, fell apart, except for they didn't get to the playoffs. And you wonder, if they don't get to the playoffs again, is Dougie P in trouble?
I do. I believe he would be. No question in my mind. Doug was a breath of fresh air. I remember being in their training camp 2 years ago. It was after the Urban Meyer bad experience. I just know that there was like a weight lifted without Meyer, and Doug Peterson is like the opposite of him. He brought a lot of optimism and calmness, and then they choked, as you said. Doug felt pressure, so he fired pretty much his whole defensive staff. Brought in Brian Nielsen, who's a really good coordinator. Did a good job with Atlanta. Atlanta didn't have a lot of talent on defense last season. He overachieved. He did a great job. Press Taylor. Now, Press got the offensive play calling. In season, Peterson handed it off. It didn't go well at all, to say the least. That's a problem. That's one thing, Mike. We know what happened in Philly. Why Doug got fired. It wasn't just Press Taylor. It was right up there, but there were other issues, but Press Taylor's among them because he was insistent on Taylor being his offensive coordinator. So you got to watch that. Defensively, again, they're going to have a lot of change. They're not very good in the secondary at all. The offensive line, not bad. Receiver corps has been completely revamped. They're going to have 2 new starters on the outside. It's a good but not great team. I'm going to believe that Brian Nielsen, he replaces Mike Caldwell, a former Eagles linebacker and also an assistant coach. I believe the coaching will be better, and they're going to push for that division, Mike, and they're going to be a wild card, but they're not going to win that division. I'm going to pick the Texans to win it.
All right, that one should be a fun battle there because the Texans go in now with pressure, which is what Jacksonville had last year. Let's creep up to the top 10, number 11. You like the Jets here.
Well, Aaron Rodgers, listen, it was an absolute nightmare. They went through 5 starting quarterbacks last season. That can't happen. That was a bad job there by not having a qualified backup. I know they wanted Zach Wilson to make it. They missed on that. Their offensive line was not good enough. They missed on that. Great defense. Joe Douglas has drafted an incredible defense. They got to get the Hassan Reddick contract situation straightened out. The receiver, they have no receiver depth at all. That's a problem. Alan Lazard, $10 million fully guaranteed this season. That's why they didn't cut him. It's the only reason. Their depth on the offensive line is going to be better. Joe did address it. He made a lot of moves on the offensive line. They're going to be much better, obviously, with Aaron Rodgers back. If Rodgers plays 14 out of 17 games, Mike, they're going to win that AFC. So they're my 11th team, and you have a qualified quarterback, you're going to be a good football team.
An interesting one here because number 10, they thought they didn't have a qualified quarterback, so they went out and got a guy that somebody else thought was qualified, and he wasn't qualified enough in Denver. But now Russell Wilson's at spot number 10, Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I struggle with this one, but the roster, boy, this is hard to do. They've completely rebuilt their offensive line in 2 seasons. Starting in 2023 and now in 24, they have 5 new starters. Their best offensive lineman last season, they graded Isaac Seumalo, their left guard, as their best. They're going to have a new center in Zach Frazier from your school, West Virginia. Broderick Jones is going to move from right to left. Troy Fatano is going to be the right tackle. James Daniels won't have to play center. I know I'm told they were considering it, but he's going to play right guard. They got Rowan Wilson, who they like. George Pickens is a breakout player. That they know they need to add a receiver. They'll look to do that by training camp. Great running game. They've reshaped their secondary. I'm a little bit concerned about their cornerback depth. That's certainly an issue. They brought Patrick Queen in. Really good front, Mike. This is a really good football team. But this division is so good, it's going to be hard for them to make it, but the Steelers are my 10th team, and they're going to be a good football team.
I was a little surprised by that one. Let's see in the top 10. We go to number 9, the third team from the AFC North. This time it's Cleveland. New quarterback situation there.
Yep. All right, so there's only one issue for this football team. It's the quarterback. Deshaun Watson has not played good football since 2020. He's coming back from major right shoulder surgery, but the roster, the offensive line is really, really good. They know they had to add another receiver. They did that. Jerry Jeudy, they paid him. They're going to go with more 11 personnel, which means 3 receivers, 1 back, 1 tight end. Nick Chubb, their star running back, coming off of a devastating knee injury. They addressed it. Brought in Dante Foreman. Jerome Ford was a good backup. Kevin Stefanski, by the way, their head coach, 2-time Coach of the Year. 2 out of 4 years that are, Mike. That's pretty remarkable to me. Went to St. Joe's Prep here in Philly. Defense under Jim Schwartz, really, really good last season. All 4 starters back in the secondary. They've got a deep secondary. I ran into Rodney McLeod at the Super Bowl. He told me he was coming back. He did. He's back. He'll be a backup this year at safety. Jordan Hicks had a great year for the Vikings, believe it or not. Not many people talking about it, but he graded out very well, talking to the Vikings about him. But he signed with the Browns to start at middle linebacker. Great front. This is a really good football team. But the reason why I don't have him higher than 9, Mike, simple. Quarterback has not played well since 2020. He's got to play at least average to above average football for them to get in the playoffs. They got enough around him. He's just got to get the job done.
All right, going up to number 8, they just made a couple signings to the UFL. They went to the UFL League, Dallas did, to try to help out that roster. But you like them at number 8.
Yeah, the Cowboys at number 8, Mike. You worry about this. What if they get off to a bad start? Talking to coaches over the years, they always worry when they're on the last year of their deals. The way I understand it is all the assistants, including McCarthy, are on short-term. No, not all of them, but a lot of them are on deals that are going to expire this year. I doubt that. I can't imagine Brian Schottenheimer's, who's their OC, he doesn't call the plays. McCarthy does. But I'm sure Schottenheimer's contract goes more than 2 years. Usually that's what happens with coordinators. But McCarthy is not signing an extension. This is it. He's a lame duck coach. They better get off to a good start because you don't want these players to start tuning the guy out if they know that he's on the final year of his 5-year deal. Depth at receiver is a problem. Dak's coming off a good year. Yes, the playoff game was terrible. Was it just his fault? 2 new starters on the offensive line. That does worry me a little bit. Defensively, where's the pass rush? They're going to have it, obviously, with Parsons as a stud, but is DeMarcus Lawrence, does he still have it? At 32 years old, he's had a lot of injuries in his career. The secondary, their best corner's coming back from ACL reconstruction, Terry Von Diggs. They're revamping their secondary a little bit, but still going to be pretty good. They're a good team. But I worry about all the stuff that's around them. I've got the Cowboys at 8.
Right. Let's go into the 7th spot. This team has a lot of pressure on them, man. They added a lot of talent, but you go from a team that people thought were going to win 4 games, you sneak up on everybody. You still like the Houston Texans number 7.
Mike, so here's the thing, right? Here's the thing with the Texans. Nick Caserio, and I buried the guy for a couple of years because he missed on a lot of personnel decisions. He went with, if you thought the Eagles went cheap last year in free agency, that's all he did. The first couple of years, he went cheap, and then he went on a spending spree the last 2 years, but he also drafted extremely well. I'm going to give people credit when they do a good job. Caserio, that came over from New England, has done a great job the last 2 years. D'Amico Ryans is phenomenal. Bobby Slowick, their OC, had never even been in position coach with anyone. What a great job he did. Matt Burke, who's a Jim Schwartz protege, is their D coordinator. They've drafted well. Their offensive line, they finally got it right. They have depth. They're relatively young. They're really gifted there. Mixon was a major upgrade at running back over Damian Pierce. Their defense has been completely redone the last 2 years. Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson will be their edge rushers. They've redone their secondary. I love this roster. Mike, I checked it. The books last year had them from anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5 wins. And believe me, I had them. I like the under one with Scott Farrell. I like the under 5 last year. I got that one wrong the year before. Who did I get wrong? Under 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars. It shows you nobody knows.
All right, yes, that's so many times where you're just like, I have no idea how this team went from 4 to 10. They won the division with 10 wins last year. Adam Kaplan, football at 4. Moving to the top here, we're at number 6. It's the 4th team from the AFC North. How about the Baltimore Ravens?
I mean, you convinced now how good this division is? I mean, it's amazing. Now, the reason why I don't have them higher, Zach Orr, the defensive coordinator, is 31 years old. His career got cut down, I believe, to a neck injury. He was a linebacker. Really smart guy. Talk to people who know him. But he's never called plays before. This is a big deal. Mike McDonald is now the Seahawks head coach, who did a phenomenal job. This is, look, you just don't know, but Todd Monken's second year with Lamar Jackson as his offensive coordinator. John Harbaugh's a phenomenal head coach. Their offensive line's going to have a couple challenges. I'm a little bit worried about it. They're fine at receiver. They could use more edge rusher help, but it's more about scheme with them rather than having talent. Back end is really good. They addressed their cornerback position with Nate Wiggins, their first-round pick. They have some question marks, but Lamar, look, he's terrific. Derrick Henry is the big one, Mike. I can't wait for this one. Like, are they going to have Lamar run as much? Who knows? But it's going to be fascinating to see how that fits in. The Ravens are number 6.
Top 5, here we go. Adam Kaplan's top 5. Oh, I think a lot of pressure on this team, too. Green Bay, another team. Not a lot of expectations, and now they have them.
Mike, so what I did is I asked some friends who are in personnel what they thought of both the Eagles and the Packers. I'm basically waving the flag with Jordan Love. I'm so in on Jordan Love this season. I'm just blown away with the way no quarterback was better in the second half of the National Football League last season by tape. Talking to people in pro personnel around the NFL, he's phenomenal. They have the best young receiver core in the National Football League. They're also the deepest. Not a great offensive line, but it's adequate. They're going to have Josh Jacobs now at running back, who's an upgrade. Defensively, new scheme. Jeff Hafley, the former Boston College head coach, he's only been a D coordinator once in his career. That was at Ohio State. He was a co-coordinator for 1 year. But they're going to change their scheme. Their defense had underachieved for years, Mike, under Joe Barry. They've revamped their secondary, 2 new starters at safety. They have to be better at corner, Mike. They've got good pass rushers. This is a really good football team, but I don't have them higher than number 5.
Yeah, that one's going to be fun. That division's going to be really interesting. Detroit, Green Bay, Chicago's getting a little buzz right now. Chicago went out and got a lot of weapons on that team. All right, let's get into the top 5. You got Green Bay 5. Philadelphia is number 4.
Yeah, so the difference here is the experience of coordinators. Vic Fangio, one of the best of the last 25 years. He's done a lot with a lot. He's done a lot with not a lot. I mean, he's pretty amazing. The job that he's done when he hasn't been given a lot of talent, if you just go by talking to people who've worked with him, guys at Savannah, as a couple people have told me, he's amazing. Now he gets to run, the Eagles get to run his scheme with the real Fangio. Michael Clay has really risen his star here. I mean, it looked bad 2 years ago. or 3 years ago, and better 22. But now they really took off their special teams units, Mike, as you know. Kellen Moore's really, really good as a coordinator. Unfortunately, he lost so many players at receiver. Couldn't run the offense, as I'm told, by people close to him the way he wanted, but he will here, as long as nobody gets hurt. Barkley's an upgrade, major upgrade at running back. I'm going to buy in that Hurts will be better this season. I'm a little concerned about the 2 offensive line changes. I'm concerned about no Kelsey. I'm concerned about no Fletcher Cox. Don't underestimate that loss of Fletcher Cox. We don't talk enough about that. I'm very bullish on these upgrades at the secondary and how they're going to get younger. Well, they have more competition in inside linebacker. Are they any better? That remains to be seen. This is a good football team. I believe the coaching will be way better on the defensive side. Do not underestimate the upgrades, not only with Fangio, but his assistant group, including Clint Hurtt is phenomenal as a defensive line coach, Mike. It's a toss-up between Green Bay and Philly. I'm going to bet on the coaching staff. I'm going to go with the Eagles at 4.
All right, they are 4, and that means number 3, it's Detroit. The Lions sneak in there ahead of Green Bay in the NFC North.
Mike, I'll tell you what, going into the offseason, if the Lions lost Ben Johnson, I was out on the Lions. Well, he's back. I didn't expect that. He was my number 1 head coaching candidate. He was definitely around the league. There was no debate about that. But it didn't work out for him in Washington. He didn't want the job. He backed out. They've got conflicting reasons why, but he's back. Aaron Glenn's back, who's done a really good job as a coordinator. Dave Phipp, former Eagles special teams coach, is there. Hank Fraley does a great job hunting buns. You might remember him as an offensive lineman. Hank's the best. Jimmy O'Neill's from Philly, who's DB's coach there. They're really well coached, one of the best coaching staffs in the National Football League. They had to rebuild their secondary at corner. They've done that. Brian Branch will be a starter. Terrion Arnold, the first-round pick. They traded for Carlton Davis, the Bucs former best corner. They need one more pass rusher. I don't like the signing of Marcus Davenport. Marcus Davenport's been hurt a lot, but outstanding offensive line, one of the top 3. Great offensive scheme, great coaching. They're my number 3 team. It's amazing to talk about the Lions in top 10 of anything, but they're really, really good, Mike.
They are. I agree with you there. And then the 2 is the defending Super Bowl champions. Even though they're the best, you have them at number 2.
Yeah, and they're going for 3 in a row, first time ever. Look, I said this with Scott Farrell. We did the segment on TV, and we had to do a real quick one. I said, look, it's real simple. You got to look at everything when you evaluate a football team. It's not just one particular thing. The coaching with Andy is great. As long as him and Mahomes are together, they're going to be an elite team. I don't like all the off-the-field stuff. That does worry me slightly. The receiver core, they're going to finally get some speed, but Xavier Worthy might have been overdrafted. I don't understand what the Bills were thinking, though. Making that trade with the Chiefs, their arch nemesis, that was kind of bizarre to me. They got Hollywood Brown, I'm a big fan of. Rashee Rice is going to wind up being suspended for how long, we'll have to see. Defensively, great coaching by Steve Spagnuolo. There's some questions in their secondary at corner, Mike. Remember, they traded their best corner to the Titans because they didn't want to pay him? That does worry me a little bit, Mike. That's a big reason why I have the Niners at number 1.
Yep, San Francisco at number 1, and this is a team that obviously still loaded with talent, and you like them better than everybody.
This is the NFL's most talented roster. The only issues they have, and they've gotten away with it, is the interior of their offensive line. It does worry me a little bit. They addressed it a little bit in the offseason. The receiver core, they're super deep now. In fact, you have to wonder how they're going to make Brandon Ayuk happy because they're ways away from getting extension done. Not ruling it out by training camp, but they're not there yet. Defensively, they drafted Renardo Green. I know they're very high on him, and it's a second-round pick. I really thought they'd go for corner in the first round. So corner, they're still not great opposite Charvarius Ward, who's really good. Great front, really good coaching, great schemes, Mike. They're the deepest team in the National Football League. They're my number 1 team.
There you go. Adam Kaplan's top teams in the NFL as we get to the offseason here after OTAs, mini camps, his first power rankings of the season based on a whole bunch of things. Roster, depth, offensive, defensive scheme, the quality of coaching. San Francisco, Kansas City, Detroit, Philadelphia, and the Packers are your top 5. One team that was not in that top list there that I thought was kind of interesting that I think might be in there is the Rams. I think the Rams are better than people think this year, but we have all offseason to kind of think about that. Adam Kaplan's back on Friday for Football at 4. Thank you, Adam.
Mike, and Friday we'll talk about the teams that did make it. That's actually a great subject. Good one. We'll talk about that Friday.
Good stuff. All right, Adam, we're back on Friday. And, of course, check out the Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside the Birds, of course, and get their YouTube content, including Football at 4. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash, and coming up, we've got a whole heck of a lot to do with Nick Earnshaw for today's Nuggets. Nick's Nuggets are coming up here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive.
We have the...
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
For sitting in traffic.
You come with me.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
4:32 on a Tuesday. It's time for Nick's Nuggets. They're brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. You know, NBA free agency opens up July 1, so we'll be all over that. The draft is June 26. You can hear round one coverage on Wednesday night. It used to be Thursday night, but they don't do it on Thursday anymore. They're doing 2 days. The Thursday second round starts at 4 o'clock, which will be live on the air. So if the Sixers make a move on day 2 of the draft, we'll have that for you here on 97.3 ESPN. Nick Earnshaw has today's edition of Nick's Nuggets.
What's going on, Mike? Nice to see you once again after a fantastic Phillies win last night. I mean, that was an awesome way to come back home after losing 2 straight to Baltimore. And I got to start. Nugget number 1, June Schwarber. I mean, this guy is on fire again in the month of June, Mike. This is absolutely fantastic. And over the past 4 years, right, he has 10 multi-homer games in the month of June, including 2 this month. I mean, absolutely fantastic. And if you look at it, over the course of the rest of the season and every other month, he only has 10, which is crazy to think about. And also, according to MLB.com, he is now averaging 1 home run every 10.3 career at-bats in the month of June, placing him ahead of Babe Ruth, who did it with 10.6. So Schwarber's up there with the Babe. I think that's pretty good company. Mike, that's a big way to get the offense started with Schwarber hitting 2 bombs last night with the 18 hits they had as well.
Yeah, well, you asked me, I think, last week if I thought he was going to hit. What was the number? 8 home runs in the month?
7 or 8, right? We said it?
I think,
last year.
I think you said 8, and I went over.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I'm feeling pretty good about that right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's at 5 so far this month. So that, I mean, he's got what? Today is the 18th. He's got a little bit of time. He just has to hit 3 more. If he has 1 more multi-home run game, I mean, he's right there, Mike. So I think he might be able to do it and eclipse 8 at this point for June Schwarber month.
I don't think there's any question. I mean, the way he's going right now, you know, last night Rob Thompson said, I don't know the answer to the question why this guy gets so scorching hot, but for whatever reason, he gets locked in. I mean, he starts to feel a little bit more comfortable at the plate, has a little bit better read on where he is as a hitter. And last night, I mean, he was dialed in. He crushes that ball in the 3rd inning to give them an early lead, and then he gets another one later on. What to me is interesting is the batting average is up to around 250 right now. I was talking about him earlier. If he could stay this hot through the month of June and get himself up to like 265 and hit, 40 home runs this year with Mookie Betts out, you got to start thinking about him. He's a long shot plus like 9,000 right now. You might want to throw a couple shackles down there, Nicky Earnshaw.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's been absolutely fantastic. The batting average is up over 250. It's above that Mendoza line by a ton, right? Like, he's been fantastic. And he's at the top of the list in walks. He's leading the NL in walks. I mean, this guy has been fantastic at the dish. He's patient. He slimmed down in the offseason. He's still hitting home runs. He's walking a lot. He's hitting more singles this year. Remember, it was like either walk, strike out, or home run from Kyle Schwarber over the past couple of years. This year, he's hitting more singles, and he's getting more base hits. That's why you're seeing the average up a little bit more. But the power's starting to come around with the home runs here in the month of June. And he's the best leadoff hitter in baseball, in my opinion, Mike. He has to be. The OPS, he's been great all season long. The OPS is up, slugs up since the beginning of the year. I mean, how can you not want this guy in the leadoff spot at the moment? He can hit a home run. He's getting on base. He walks a lot. I mean, what else are you going to ask for? He's not your prototypical, but I love it.
Yep, I never had a problem with him hitting leadoff. So, yeah, you're not getting any complaints from me. I get the on-base percentage. He gets on base. And listen, it's not like the Phillies went outside the box and put him in the leadoff spot. He hit leadoff in Boston, Chicago, and everybody else that he has pretty much been. He has always been a leadoff hitter.
Yeah, he has been fantastic. He's not your old school prototypical type that can always steal bases, et cetera, contact guy. He's a guy with power, and he's adding the contact to his arsenal along with the walks. He's been fantastic. Jones Schwarber is here, Mike, for nugget number 1. Now I'll go to nugget number 2 and kind of revisit the question of the day. Was Johan Rojas sent to the minor leagues? Was that the right move? Mike, I think it was, and I think you would agree with me here. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. Remember, the defensive run saved is at -8 this year. He was a +15 last year in around the same amount of games. Since May 4th, he's only walked once. Since May 10th, only has 1 extra base hit. Remember, he's 23 years of age and can still develop and clear his head, right? He can go down there, get meaningful at bats, and kind of work on some things that he has struggled with in the major leagues, right? Like at the base pass, he struggled. He's scared to take a secondary lead. We saw that in Baltimore because he doesn't want to get picked off. So those are things you could develop in the minors. Remember, he came straight from AA to the majors. So he's now going to AAA for the first time. Hopefully he can work on some things and can be used as a trade chip. I would not be shocked if David Dombrowski moved him to give him a new start. It's the right move for the Phillies, but they have to go out and make a move, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, listen, I don't have a huge problem with I like Rojas a lot. I understand what he brings, defense and speed, and they're not maximizing that. His defense has been very good, but not elite. He had to be elite, and the speed's not being utilized enough. I think he had a nice little hot stretch to get him up to 237, but he has kind of fizzled out since then. No extra base hits, no power. The speed just hasn't been a big enough thing for them. My thing would be this. They elected him over Dahl at the start of the season. Why did they change their mind on that this time? I don't see Dahl being a big part of this team. He's not in the lineup today. So are you doing more damage by sending him down and keeping Dahl mentally? Now, if you handle it the right way, you can go to AAA, go get some more bats, play every day, and get better. You just hope that you didn't ruin this guy's confidence. That's all.
Yeah. That's definitely a concern, but I think because of how young he is, and he kind of was promoted out of nowhere, right? You didn't really think they were really going to promote him straight from AA to the majors, but they needed someone out there in center field because of the glove. And the glove's taken a little bit of a step back now. So that's why it's like, all right, we could live with the bat not being as great. I mean, he's in the bottom ranks of the advanced metrics, bat speed, et cetera, in the league. So you were like, okay, I can live with that if the glove is going to be all world. And it just hasn't been this year. That's even taken a step back. He's taking weird routes to balls out there in center field. It doesn't seem to me like he has the same confidence in center field that he did last year. So it makes sense. Send him down to AAA. He'll get a ton of playing time, meaningful at bats, be at the top of the lineup, down with Lehigh Valley. I think it just makes sense because of where he's at and his age. Remember, it's a little different with pitchers. Jose Alvarado was sent down during the World Series year early on in the season, came back to be one of their better relievers and is still one of the better relievers in baseball right now. He is a huge part of that bullpen. So it's a little bit of a different scenario, but being sent down, I think he'll be okay. And, he might get moved anyway. So I think it makes sense for the Phillies to do this. It might even make sense for Johan Rojas to continue to develop because he's so young.
Yeah, listen, there's a lot of scenarios here. Does he get used in a trade chip? I asked Frank Close earlier, do you see Rojas back up here at some point this year? He said yes. So do they still view him Rob Thompson said something interesting yesterday. He said the best version of our team is with him playing defense and his speed. So do they still view him as the center fielder on a World Series team?
It seems like they do. And if he's still around and they don't really make a gigantic move at the deadline, then I could see him coming back up if he improves down at AAA. Like, if they want to utilize his speed on the base pass, he can't be getting picked off all the time, and he can't be scared to take a secondary lead because he got thrown out on Friday night. Like, that can't happen. So he's just got to get his mind right down in AAA, get the defense a little bit better, figure himself out, and gain his confidence back. If he does, he might be back here in September.
I'd say this, his defense was better than Marsh last night.
Yeah, it was, because Marsh took some weird angles to the baseball on a couple of pop flies out there, and he's faster than Marsh. He's much faster than Marsh.
Look, I think he was great defensively. He just wasn't elite. That's the problem. And everybody's expecting him to be elite defensively. He wasn't. And I think not being elite plus the lack of, getting on base, not being able, he stole 14, 15 bases, which is what he stole last year, by the way, in about the same games. So I think the Phillies just looked at an opportunity to maybe get him some more seasoning. We'll see how that all goes. But no, I don't have a problem with him getting sent back. It was inevitable because they didn't want to lose Dahl, they didn't want to use Pache, and they both had no minor league options left.
Yep. It makes total sense to send him down at this point in the season with where the Phillies are at, being at the top of the standings. It just made total sense. Before I move on to a different sport with the Nuggets, I got a bonus nugget for you. So Destiny Lugardo of Phillies Nation reports JT spoke to the media, JT Realmuto, and this is a quote from her tweet. He said the procedure he had is the same one he had at the end of the 2019 season, so it was a cleanup, not a repair. He doesn't expect to feel any pain once he is back. He injured the knee in early May against the Giants as he slipped on the bases. Mike, I think that's why Dave Dombrowski was so confident in his return. He could come right back and slide right in to catching behind the dish. I think that's why he was so confident at this point, right?
Well, I'm sure they had the conversation of hey, this is sore. It's similar. I mean, yes, there's some background there because, yes, I was a little surprised at the way that Dave Dombrowski, it's a month. Yeah, he'll be back, no problem.
That's what I was saying. I was like, whoa, he's pretty confident. This is just a repair. That's what it seems like. It's not a full procedure, just a little, a fix-up, I guess.
Yeah, a clean-out is what they generally, a meniscus, there are people in the NFL who play the same week as a meniscus. Some of those clean-outs are pretty, they're not debilitating to where you could play the same week. If you're a quarterback, sometimes to get the knee cleaned out, they'll play that same week. So this seems to be I think we're looking at meniscus and thinking of Joel Embiid all the time that he missed. And this is obviously a different, injury there. I wonder if it's the same injury that Joe Mazzulla has to get fixed. He said after the game last night, he has to get his meniscus fixed.
Yeah, he's got to get his. Everyone has a meniscus problem, apparently, in Boston and Philadelphia sports. That's crazy. But I do want to turn my attention to nugget number 3 to the Boston Celtics. I mean, they win the NBA Finals last night. Not great. You don't want to see that if you're a Sixers fan, but I got to talk about the celebration here. I don't know, Mike, if you saw Jason Tatum after the game. It was the corniest thing I have ever witnessed of a player after winning a championship. He tried mimicking Kevin Garnett. Did you see this?
Loosely, yes.
Oh my goodness. He was trying to essentially create his own Kevin Garnett moment.
Yeah, anything is possible. It was almost 16 years to the day, wasn't it?
Yeah, nearly almost to the same exact day. I could not believe that he went out there and tried to force everything. He was getting blown up on social media about the whole entire thing. Oh my goodness, you're not Kevin Garnett, man. Do your own thing. Why are you trying to force it? I thought that was the most ridiculous thing he could have done after being a champion, after winning, and then being interviewed. I mean, what are you doing, man? Think of your own thing, man. Be original.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it last night. I felt a little. I felt a little cringeworthy towards him.
Yeah, I was sitting there and just cringing, and I could feel it. I was like, oh, don't try this, man. You have all these millions of people watching.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel what you're saying. It felt like he was trying to do something impactful, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, he was trying to recreate the Kevin Garnett thing and make it his own, and it just totally backfired. He was getting slammed all day on social media for it. It was pretty hysterical. But I'll move on to nugget number 4, and that means with Boston winning, Mike, that the Sixers are now in the offseason. You know, what better way to celebrate Boston winning than seeing who the Sixers are working out at their facility? Sam Decker is one player. Jarrett Culver, Stanley Johnson, and former Sixer Tony Bradley. That's who the Sixers are working out heading into the offseason, coming up here towards the end of June, early July here, Mike. Did you wake up to that news, and did that get you excited with the names they started working out?
No, I think I'm more excited about Sam Decker's wife, Olivia Decker, who is the sideline. That is actually Kevin Harlan's daughter for Westwood One. No, Sam Decker hasn't been relevant, really. He was okay in Houston, but much better player at the college. Tony Bradley actually wasn't terrible. North Carolina, the Sixers had him. They traded him. He's not the answer at backup center. The other two guys, I don't even know who you said.
Yeah, it sounded like it was Jarrett Culver and Stanley Johnson.
Jarrett Culver, actually. I do remember him at Texas Tech. He was pretty good that year that they went to the Final Four.
Yeah, these are the names I'm not getting excited about if they're going to fill out their roster with these guys. And Tony Bradley, he hasn't been relevant for a while. He played 12 games in Chicago last year, averaged 2 minutes in those 12 games. Not the name you want to hear as a backup center to Joel Embiid.
No, and I don't think any of those guys are going to be a part of it. Tony Bradley was part of a trade. The Sixers made a trade for somebody. Do you know who was in that trade?
It was to Oklahoma City, wasn't it?
He got traded to Oklahoma City in a 3-way deal. In exchange, he was in the Zaire Smith trade.
Oh, okay. Zaire Smith, a guy they traded for on draft night for Mikal Bridges, who's now with the Brooklyn Nets, whose name has been mentioned with the 76ers in offseason rumors. So, it'd be nice to have Mikal Bridges back.
He started 8 games for the Sixers that year, scored 5 points a game and 5 rebounds. So he gave you like a half a double-double.
There you go. Hey, that'd be a nice backup to Joel Embiid.
I think
more than Paul Reed.
I think backup center will be something they target in free agency. We'll see. I know our own Michael Kasky-Blomain put out some predictions, and he thinks the Sixers will be getting Andre Drummond back here, and he was probably the best backup center that they had in the Embiid era.
Yeah, I think it would probably Drummond and Dwight Howard are probably the two best that they had. Dwight Howard gave you some decent minutes when he was here, could get a lot of boards. He did get in a lot of foul trouble back when he was the backup, but they need someone. Paul Reed is not a 5. We just have to put that out there. Paul Reed is not a center. He should not be backing up Joel Embiid. He is a stretch 4 and a power forward. He's a small ball 5 at best. So that's not what you need to have after Joel Embiid goes out of the game. Andre Drummond, if he's able to come back, that would be a massive win. Because remember, you gave him up in the Ben Simmons trade a couple of years ago, and you really haven't replaced him since then. They haven't had a backup center. And how many years have we said that the Sixers have not had a backup center behind Embiid? It just seems like it's the same thing every single year.
All right, man. Yeah, I know. I'm looking for the backup center. We need Andre Drummond or something better than what I agree. I've been saying for years, as much as people like Paul Reed, I've never been a Paul Reed guy. I actually like Charles Bassey was the guy that I thought they should have kept.
He went to the Spurs. He was great. He was great in Delaware. I got to see him a lot when I worked for the Coats down in Delaware. So he's a good name out there that they let go. Another Isaiah Joe type that they let go.
That's right. Well, I mean, unfortunately, Isaiah Joe, is now a starting player for a team that was the number 1 seed. The Sixers messed that up, like they've messed everything up seemingly over the last 10 years. All right, there you go. Today's Nuggets, Nick Earnshaw here on the Sports Bash. All right, Nick, thanks a bunch, man.
All right, Mike, I'll talk to you.
All right, that's Nick. And, of course, the Nuggets are brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. And coming up in the 5 o'clock hour tonight, taking a look at who had the best offseason in the NFL. Think about it. Text me, 609-403-0973. Which team in the NFL had the best offseason? We got the 10 best coming up next here on the Sports Bash. You got your list together there, Josh? You thinking about who had the 10 best off seasons?
Thinking about it.
Think about it. Get that to me. You got 10 minutes. The clock is ticking. Coming up on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
5 o'clock, Sports Bash taking you home till the top of the hour tonight. No basketball left. The Celtics are the NBA champions, 18-time champions is Boston. Kind of nauseating when you think about it. Had a lot of texts on that earlier today. What does it mean for the Sixers moving forward? Well, obviously they have a lot to do. Can they catch the Celtics? Celtics bring everybody back. Now, it's tough to go back-to-back, but they're the favorites again. We gave you the odds. Sixers are 7th. They look. Here's what we talked about with Boston. They valued Brad Stevens, the executive, more than Brad Stevens, the coach. Now it's time for Daryl Morey, the executive, to start doing things. I think it's fair to start holding his feet to the fire. He had to make a lot of moves to untangle the mess when he got here, right? The web of mistakes that they made, bad contracts, bad cap situation, all of those things. He got them out of a bunch and put them in position now, and now it's time for Daryl Morey to put his thumbprint on this team. Look, has he done a great job? I wouldn't say that, but you can only do so much within the constraints of the cap. He got him out of the Horford deal. He got him out. Now, Horford ends up winning an NBA championship, although I don't know how many Sixers fans were, hoping that they would have kept Horford. I think when they traded Horford away, people were pretty excited and happy about that. But he had to make a lot of moves to kind of get out of the problems that the Sixers, handed to him. When the Sixers hired him, most of the beginning of his tenure here was trying to get out of the problems that this team handed him. Hey, we messed this, and this up. Try to get us out of this. So I think he did a good job. Not a great job. He did a good job in getting them to this offseason where they are right now. And where they are right now, this offseason is in a spot where they can really make some moves. Now, the thing is, does he make the right moves? This team has had a ton of opportunities in their past with tons of cap space and a ton of assets. And they've screwed it up. Elton Brand, Brett Brown, Brian Colangelo, all of them collectively have done a pretty awful job. Now, Daryl Morey's first move as 76ers general manager, he selected Tyrese Maxey. It's the first move he made. He drafted Tyrese Maxey. That was the first move he made. He also drafted Isaiah Joe and Paul Reed in that same draft class. Joe has gone on to be a starter in Oklahoma City. Paul Reed, to me, I think it's time to move on. But they drafted Tyrese Maxey. So they did a really good job there. He also did a really good trade back in 2020 when they traded Josh Richardson out of here. They got out of that Josh Richardson deal and ended up getting Seth Curry. So that was a good move that he made. A couple of the other moves that he made. I know a lot of people look at him and say, what has he really done? Again, a lot of it was getting out of deals. He traded Al Horford to Oklahoma City, and that was that Danny Green trade, but they ended up getting a first-round pick in that deal. And that pick is an asset that they still kind of hold on to, which could help them in this offseason. People forget about that. They got a first-round pick, and in the deal with Danny Green. So they still have that pick kind of coming their way. They also traded, let's see, I'm trying to remember who was in a part of this deal. We just talked about the deal, or it was the Tony Bradley trade, with a bunch of picks. It was a 3-team trade that they ended up doing. And in that trade, the 76ers ended up getting a couple of picks that they're getting in this draft. The 2024, they have a second-round pick that they got there. They made a couple other moves where they traded Curry, Drummond, and Simmons, a first-round pick, right? And that was to Brooklyn in the James Harden deal. Now, all of that is pretty much out the window, but what that also did was it freed up the Ben Simmons money, because remember, Ben Simmons is still signed and playing in Brooklyn. Harden's contract is off the books. So that deal, whether you like the deal, hate the deal, don't like the deal, whoever the deal, Harden is out of here and his contract are off the books. So by getting Simmons out of here, he also got that contract off your books. So that freed up more cap space. The other thing that I guess you can take a look at is you got to go back to that Thibault deal. That was a big one. That was a 4-team trade with Matisse Thybulle. They traded draft picks all over the place. What did Philadelphia end up getting in that deal? I could have sworn that the Sixers ended up getting some sort of flexibility with that deal. I could be wrong with that, but they traded Matisse in that deal. They also traded James Harden, and that cleared up a ton of cap space because the Harden contract got off the books. Now, he's a free agent now, too. But in return, they didn't take any salary on. They cleared all of the salary out, which has now put them in position to do what they can do this offseason. So the Richardson trade cleared that contract off the books. The Horford trade cleared that contract off the books. And the Simmons trade cleared that contract off the book. So he had to get out of some really bad deals and put them in position for this offseason where they can now have no money on the books and they have the ability to use draft picks because of the draft picks they got in return for guys like James Harden. I don't know. I think they got a pick back in one of the other deals.
So I got the Thibault deal in front of me right now. So part of the Thibault deal, which there's so many moving parts in this deal, it's ridiculous. It's a 4-team deal. But Thibault, as we know, went to the Trailblazers. But as part of the deal, the Sixers also walked away. That was the deal that landed them McDaniels. And they got 2 second-round picks out of it. But they also got a trade exception in there.
I was going to say, I thought they got something in that trade for Thibault that was like something usable.
The trade exception, probably. But they also got 2 second-round picks that were better than what they currently had owed.
The Harden deal, too, gave them some flexibility. They got out of the Harden deal, and they don't have to worry about that. The players they got back in return, they're all free agents. And then they got a plethora of draft picks, not for this draft, but that they can utilize down the road.
Right. They have a lot of second-round picks that they have accumulated now. You mentioned the first-round pick in the OKC deals. But it's also the fact that all the guys they've been acquiring are all
they got a
expiring
2028
contracts.
first-round pick, a 2029 first-round pick in the Harden deal as well.
But to me, Mike, I think the bigger part of the conversation is you mentioned the players that they got. They're all were expiring contracts. So Morey has been working a lot of these deals to say, look, I'm acquiring guys for short term, but if they don't work out, I can easily get out of these deals and move on elsewhere.
Yeah, a lot of what he has done, because some people have been saying, what has he done? The question shouldn't be what has he done. It's what has he been able to do that he hasn't done? Now, you can make the arguments that, hey, why didn't they trade for Drew Holiday? Why didn't they trade for a guy like Porzingis? Did they have the capability and the assets on their team to make deals for those guys? I don't remember what Holiday was part of that trade or Porzingis. The Celtics were able to make those trades. Was Daryl Morey able to make a trade like that? And can he now? Does he have the assets to say, okay, now I have some stuff that I can make the calls this offseason that I couldn't make last offseason? 2 offseasons ago, I had to make a call to figure out how to get rid of Al Horford. That's not doing anybody any favors. So I think that Morey has been disappointing if you expected him to be able to pull out some miracles here. What he did do was some things that I don't know that a lot of other people would have been able to figure out how to get out of the Horford deal. And by getting out of the Horford deal, they didn't just become a afterthought. They became a team that you got disappointed in when they lost because he kept them relevant to some extent, even though these were trades that at the time you're like, how the heck did he get out of that Horford deal? So now I think it's fair to say, all right, you got, I would say Morey's been about a B. I mean, he hasn't been, wow. He hasn't been terrible based on what he's had to deal with. See, people want to judge him because he hasn't done, but you also have to say, what could you do? Not a whole heck of a lot. They didn't have a lot of desirable pieces on this roster. They didn't have any draft picks. He restocked the draft picks. Colangelo gave away all the draft picks. After Hinkie built them all up, Colangelo gave them all away. It was almost like him saying, Colangelo, Hinkie, screw you. I'm going to take all your work and throw it out. So he restocked the draft picks, which now puts him in position. But I think it's fair to say now, okay, Morey, you have fixed the cap problem, rebuilt the chest of draft assets, and now your feet are to the fire. I think that's totally fair. To say anything otherwise in the couple of years beforehand, I think is just saying you don't like the guy. I mean, essentially.
Yeah, I think part of the problem with all this, Mike, is the fact that all people keep bringing up is they haven't won a title. They haven't even gotten to the NBA Finals. And they overlook what Morey has done, and they focus on what the team hasn't done on the court. They're trying to create this bridge to see they haven't won a championship, they haven't gotten to the NBA Finals, so Morey stinks. And they're ignoring everything that he did to put them in position to even be competitive.
Yeah. I got a text message here that says, Mike, Morey was hired November 2nd, 2020. The draft was the 18th. I don't know how much he was involved in drafting Tyrese Maxey. If you don't think he drafted Tyrese Maxey, if you think they hired Daryl Morey and he said, you know what, guys, you go ahead and run the draft. You hired me, but I'm going to sit this one out. Then you are dumber. And I already think that this text messenger is almost
as bad as the Kim McCordell's guy last week.
But if you don't think Daryl Morey was involved in making the pick, that is straight up hatred of Daryl Morey. I already know this guy is as biased and hates Morey to begin with. But if you can't come to terms and say, you know what? Yes, he did. You think they hired Daryl Morey and he sat there on draft night and said, you know what, guys? You go ahead. You go ahead and make the pick.
Of course he didn't do that. You wouldn't hire him for that job if he was going to sit back and do nothing. One. Number two, it's been reported that Morey wanted Maxey.
Right. Well, we all know that Morey took Maxey. This is complete and blind, utter hatred towards somebody who has zero ability to say, you know what? Like I said, I like Morey, but guess what? He has to do something now. He got out of the mess. Fine. He has not been great. He's been okay. And I like Morey, but he's been mildly disappointing. I don't blame him because the Sixers gave him a mess. When you get a job and you don't have any assets to work with, it's hard to succeed. He has done more than most people would have been able to do to get out of the mess. But now, I like Morey. And I could say he's been mildly disappointing, but I'm not going to say he's been a complete failure. But what I will say is, you now have cap space and you have assets. You must succeed or you have now been a failure. You have been given the benefit of the doubt. That is being objective, not like this clown who's just saying, well, he didn't even draft Morey. You think they hired a GM of Daryl Morey's stature? Now, you might not like Morey or not, but in this league, he has very high stature. You think they hired Daryl Morey and he said on draft night, I'm going to smoke a stogie and watch you guys go to work? Get the heck out of here. Who made that pick then? Josh Harris came down and made the pick on draft night?
Certainly wasn't Josh Hennig.
No one suggested it would be Josh Hennig. But Josh Harris really made that? Who would have made that pick? Right? Who would have made that pick? Give me a good answer on that one.
Maybe the guy's trying to say Elton Brand did because Elton Brand was already there. Is that maybe the theory?
You think they're going to let Elton Brand make that pick?
I know they're not going to.
After decisions that he made to put them in the problems that they had in the first place as to why they had to hire Daryl Morey. If they thought Elton Brand was doing his job correctly, they would have hired Morey.
I agree with you. I'm just trying to rationalize why that guy is texting that in.
It's just blind hatred of somebody. It's complete inability to be objective, to say, listen, I like Morey. Okay, I like Morey. I don't think he's done a good enough job. I don't think he's been a failure, but I don't think he's done a good enough job. Now, I think he's had a lot of roadblocks. Some of them he's gotten past. Al Horford's contract, roadblock. Josh Richardson's contract, that was a roadblock. They had to figure out how to get rid of that thing. The Ben Simmons thing, that wasn't a Daryl Morey issue. He got that thrown in his lap, and he ends up getting James Harden for him. At the time, everybody thought that was amazing. How did you end up with James Harden for Ben Simmons? I was the one who said I didn't like the deal. I know everybody hated Ben Simmons. I said I didn't like the deal. Okay, so they end up getting James Harden. Indirectly, Harden doesn't want to be here either, which guess what? Okay, he figured out a way to get rid of Harden, and in return, got his contract off the books, got 3 contracts in return that are also off the books, and got multiple first-round capital for the future. So indirectly, yes, the whole Harden thing blows up in your face, and you still seem to make out from it. Because now you have draft capital that you didn't have, and you have cap flexibility that you didn't have. So again, you could hate Morey and think that all this stuff, but he outsmarted you by doing all these things even when the problem blew up in his face. Okay, the Harden stuff didn't have to happen. Well, neither did the Ben Simmons stuff. That had nothing to do with Morey. That had nothing to do with Morey, Ben Simmons. So Simmons says, I don't want to be here anymore. So what does Morey do? Well, I'm not going to trade you. And he waited and he waited and he waited, and he ends up getting Harden, which everybody thought was great, except for me. And he said, fine, I'll trade for James Harden. James Harden gets here, and then essentially he doesn't want to be here. Why? Well, Morey said this. Okay, you want to blame Morey for that? Fine, blame Morey. Well, Morey said, I'm not going to trade you, James, until I got the deal I wanted. And the deal that he got for James Harden was multiple first-round picks and cap space flexibility. So if you can't see that the Sixers won that trade, you're not smart. You're just not very bright. So you can hate Morey as much as you want and say that he's been part of the issue. Fine. But you can't also in the same breath. You also said you didn't think he drafted Maxey. Which, my God, I can't even believe it's got to that point.
I think you need to catch your breath. This guy really got you going a roll there.
I just can't believe that somebody could dislike somebody so much to say, I can't even give you credit for something that's so obvious that you deserve credit for.
I can believe it. It's called politics.
It's not politics. I mean, you just
that's the world we live in. People don't give people credit all the time.
I mean, look, if you would say that Morey failed at every other thing in his job, he at least could say, hey, I'm the guy that drafted Maxey. I mean, that's the only thing, if you want to say clear as day, you could give him credit. But the other stuff you could say, well, he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to do this. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to do this. All of those things. The only thing you could say, hey, there's one thing that he has done well, and that was he drafted Maxey. Other than that, if you want to question anything else out there, have at it. I said, I like Morey, and I don't know that he certainly hasn't gotten an A. He hasn't been an A general manager.
Right, you gave him a B.
Yeah, he's been just okay. I mean, but sometimes you can only be okay, right? Sometimes that's the only thing you can be because of what you have been given. You can say, hey, I would have liked to do X, Y. I would have liked to trade it for Drew Holiday. I didn't have anything that anybody wanted for Drew Holiday. I would have liked to trade it for Porzingis. I didn't have any draft picks at that time because of all the stuff that the previous regime did. So I think Daryl Morey is in a very important offseason. He hasn't been able to do much. And now he has put himself in position to be able to do more than he's been able to since he got here. That's how I read this.
For you, Mike, taking out the Harden-Simmons deal, was there a move or a deal that you personally would say, you know what, they probably could have done this differently or better?
Yeah, I mean, the Halliburton thing, I guess you could bring that up. Was that a real thing? I mean, is that something that was a trade that was on the table that they could have said, yes, I would take that trade?
It certainly, if it was legitimate, that report, then, yeah, you could have argued that Halliburton would have been a much better acquisition than Harden.
Yep. I think,
I feel like the Harden one is like the easy target. You know, like, I mean, for example, like, do you look at, for example, I complained, not that I was personally right, but I complained that they didn't do enough of this past deadline. That I would have liked to have seen them gotten somebody more than Buddy Hield at the past deadline. Like, is that an example of maybe something Morey could have done better? Because Morey himself said that he didn't do enough looking back on it.
Yeah, I listen, no one does 100% right. I didn't like the Harden trade, so I can't sit here and defend the Harden trade. I didn't like it. I for one of those reasons, I thought it would blow up in your face. I didn't, and I also like Simmons more than most people did. Now, Simmons has been a complete failure since, so I can't sit here and say,
no, but
if you would have still had Simmons,
right?
He just, the injuries, and he's just not the same player.
Right, but your premise was more of also about Harden, his track record, than just the Simmons part of it. Because you were looking at, you know, who Harden was and his track record and saying, you felt that, okay, this isn't the best guy to get if you had another option to get somebody, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, the whole way that the Simmons thing kind of went down, I don't know, looking back at that, I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, he didn't want to be here. He couldn't, and he can't play anymore.
Right.
I mean, although he's taking videos and pictures of himself playing again, right?
Well, that's his go-to move. He's a great Instagram fitness influencer now.
Yeah. 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. It is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. I think that, now I was going to get into, these off seasons, which I never kind of got into because I was thinking about the NBA finals last night. Mike, do you think James Harden calling Morey a liar in China is helping the Sixers? We'll see. No superstars coming to play for Daryl Morey of the Sixers. Maybe. You might be right about that. We'll find out. And if that's the case, then I don't think James Harden calling Daryl Morey a liar has any factor in this at all. But if it does, then that's a problem. I don't think it will be a problem at all. I quite frankly don't think the players around the league really care about James Harden, what he has to say. I mean, and I could be wrong. Maybe James Harden has more respect around the league than I'm giving him credit for. I don't think anybody cares. I think if the Sixers have more money, guess what? They're going to go play for more. You think he's going to say, you know what? We're going to offer you the most money. Well, James Harden called you a liar. Really? James Harden called me a liar?
I think what's more important to these players is who they're playing with, who the coach is. I think that's what matters more. I think they look at Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Nick Nurse, whoever else the Sixers sign. I think that's more important than Daryl Morey. Right, Mike?
I think so. I mean, we'll see. I think they got a lot of things that they can do this offseason. They got cap space, but they've had this before and haven't been able to get it done. The turnover has been a problem. Morey's been here since 2020, by the way. So you better have a plan. All right, Big Three on the way. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. And watch the show live video at 97.3 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive.
You're listening.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
With Mike Gill.
Never thought this radio stunt would catch on so big.
On 97.3 ESPN.
All right, 5:30 Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Big Three time, Sports Bash. Interested to see what we have today is baseball is the only live sport we really have left now.
It is. I am actually going to start with baseball because I'm seeing tweets about JT Realmuto saying that he expects to be back within 4 weeks of his surgery. He has told the media he originally was hoping he could play through the tear in his meniscus, but it came too painful. He believes he will be 100% when he returns. He says that this week he has already started helping the catchers and pitchers with game plans, and he's happy to be back around the team. So hopefully Realmuto back in the dugout also continues the good vibes, Mike, for the Phils.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they get him back, they'll be at full strength for the first time almost all season long. They lost Turner early into the season.
Right.
And we'll see what the lineup looks like when they get the whole thing kind of rocking and rolling. I mean, they had a lineup at the start of the season, but now that the season's materialized, you've seen some guys, have good years. I mean, Bohm didn't start in the 4-hole. Realmuto was in the 4-hole.
Right.
So we'll see what happens there. Do they put Realmuto back in the 4-hole? Does Bohm move? Do they keep Bohm in the 4?
I would keep Bohm there.
I would too. He's not a prototypical 4 guy, but neither is Realmuto. They don't have that guy on this team. Where does Realmuto go? Does he go to the 5-hole? Do they keep Stott there? What happens to Castellanos? So now that the season has kind of got off the ground, you'll reestablish what the lineup might look like.
And I think it would stabilize it too. I think the big positive of this, Mike, is not just that he'll be back within 3-4 weeks potentially, but he's back in the dugout helping the catchers and the pitchers. I think that when you have a guy like him with that much experience, it can only help the guys on this team to have that kind of extra voice in their ear to help them out. I think that's the real positive of this, that he's going to be with them day in and day out here.
Yeah, and listen, once they get him back, it lengthens that lineup even further, as we talked about. Just getting Trey Turner bumped everybody back 1. Castellanos went from 2 to 6. How different does your lineup look with Castellanos hitting in the 6-hole?
Well, I'm most impressed by Realmuto, and I know this is a bit of a very hyper-specific point that I'm making, so I totally acknowledge that so you can make fun of me about it later, Mike. But the idea being that I don't even see this guy wearing a knee sleeve. Like, the dude is walking around like he didn't even almost have surgery. Like, you see all the pictures of him on the field with the other guys, giving guys hugs, signing autographs with fans. Like, all the pictures, he doesn't have some, big, bulky brace on his knee or anything.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I think we thought of the meniscus thing and when we heard that initially, we thought of Joel. But I've heard plenty of
a huge brace.
I've heard plenty of people that have meniscus surgery and be right back in the same week. There are various degrees. Meniscus is one of those where it can be very, very minor. Yeah, so I'm not surprised at all that he doesn't have a brace on or anything. I've seen many people have meniscus surgery and not have any brace on.
How many of them are major league catchers, though?
I don't know. I can't really tell you off the top of my head major league catchers, but plenty of athletes I've seen have meniscus. Now, he might wear a brace when he returns, but maybe walking around the ballpark, he doesn't need one with his shorts on. I mean, I don't know how many people you see wearing a big old bulky brace with your shorts on. Now, if he's playing the game, maybe he needs to wear it. Maybe when he's just walking around, not. I'm not surprised at all. Obviously, when Dombrowski talked about this, he knew it wasn't a major deal. When he said a month, I was pretty surprised. But after thinking back, I remember, I'm trying to think of the quarter. It might have been Aikman or Romo that had meniscus surgery and played the same week. I've heard it many times in the NFL where quarterback has had the injury or even an offensive lineman have had meniscus. There are so many different degrees of meniscus injury. So it's good to hear that he could be back, because I thought he'd be gone at least 4 to 6 weeks. Which is about a month anyway, 4 to 6 weeks. So if he's back on the 4th side, I think that's early. If it's the 6th side, it's a little bit later. But a month is a little easier.
Frank Ragnow, the center for the Lions, returned a week after having meniscus surgery.
Yeah, and again, I don't, off the top of my head, I mean, it's not something I researched today, but I've heard multiple players have meniscus and come back in a week or two.
Sure, yeah. Like I said,
there was a quarterback who had it.
Well, the first guy that came up when I looked it up was Ragnow. So if there is a quarterback, I have to go further into the Google search.
Yeah.
So, but then again, we also know that I don't always type these Google searches properly. So that's another conversation for another day. Mike, story number 2. Speaking of quarterbacks, what if I told you that Geno Smith is at fault for the change of the AP voting rules? Well, Associated Press Rob Maaddi reported today that they are changing the rule and the criteria for AP Comeback Player of the Year. And according to Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio, it's because of Geno Smith.
So what did he do?
So apparently there was a big outcry when Geno Smith won Comeback Player of the Year a couple of years ago. And Rob Maaddi has reported that after talking to the voters for the Associated Press's voting awards, the spirit of the AP Comeback Player of the Year is to honor a player who has demonstrated resilience in the face of adversity, overcoming illness, serious physical injury, or other issues that kept them from playing the previous season. According to Mike Florio, he says that Rob Maaddi spoke to him and others to finalize these new guidelines because voters like Mike Florio felt that Geno Smith should have never won Comeback Player of the Year in 2022 and that they had to change the rules to make sure that players like him could never win the award again just for having a good year statistically after having a bad year.
I mean, is it really that necessary that they went that deep into all these things?
Well, apparently it was necessary enough for them to change the rule. And now, according to Mike Florio, players who would be eligible for the award next year include Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow, and Kirk Cousins, and Anthony Richardson. But a player like Russell Wilson would not qualify for the award this upcoming year.
Well, listen, I think Russell Wilson wouldn't, because why? He had he didn't have a terrible year.
He didn't have a terrible year, but under the rules, you can't have a poor statistical year, come back, have a great statistical year, and then win the award moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a problem with that. Like, if you're saying it's more for somebody who had like an off the field injury or something like that, as opposed to, hey, he just didn't play that well last year. Although I don't think that's fair. If you didn't play well the year before and you followed it up, you could be the comeback player.
Well, according to Rob Maaddi and Mike Florio, that's a violation of the spirit of the rule, and that's why they had to change it.
Yeah. Well, good for Geno Smith. He's a real trailblazer. He's another WVU guy who is setting trails. You know, Joe Mazzulla winning championships, and now Geno Smith getting the rules changed.
Although I gotta say, Mazzulla probably is a little more reserved than Geno is, right?
No, Geno's a pretty reserved, quiet guy as well. They're kind of similar.
You think they're kind of similar?
Yeah.
Every time I watch Mazzulla do interviews now, like, he almost seems like he's like half asleep sometimes, like when he's talking at some of these press conferences. I love the one day, a couple days ago, when he told the guy, he said, "Can you repeat the question? It was really long."
Mazzulla is definitely a quirky dude.
I enjoy him. I find quirky fun to watch.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, Major League Baseball is not happy today because a bankruptcy federal judge declined to order Diamond Sports Group to turn over any of its contracts or information on any of its deals to Major League Baseball. So the latest in the Bally's Sports Regional Network saga, which is supposed to eventually be handed over to Amazon, Major League Baseball was trying to get involved in the reorganization plan because Major League Baseball had been distributing some of these regional sports network games in the face of the bankruptcy. Well, Major League Baseball wants to get in more information on these contracts and get their hands on some of the confidentiality information, to which a federal judge today has said, Major League Baseball, you have no right to this information. And now Major League Baseball is out of the loop on some of the distribution agreements when it comes to...
Well, they're trying to get the information because they want to start their own...
Correct. Yeah. Distribution service. Yeah. And they're trying to get in on this situation with Diamond Sports Group.
The problem is they're not going to get every team in the league.
Right.
Like the Yankees aren't going to give up the Yes Network.
No.
And the Phillies are on NBC Philadelphia, which right now, I mean, is in good standing. It's all the Bally's group. So whatever teams are on those Bally's would be the only teams that would be on this platform, so they wouldn't be able to get all of the teams.
According to the report, as of right now, Amazon Prime is still on track to receive the digital distribution side of the RSN carriers that used to be Bally Sports, which according to this article may soon no longer be called Bally Sports. That's a whole other side of it. So,
well, they used to be the Fox Sports. I mean, they've gone through everything.
They were originally Fox Sports, correct. Yeah, there's actually talk right now that it could end up being FanDuel. Could end up being the new person who takes a handle on that.
Yeah.
That Amazon and FanDuel may come to an agreement.
That would be interesting if FanDuel was able to kind of get their, thumbprint on because they have where do you get that channel? Do you have that channel?
I do. Well, it's on so if you don't have Xfinity, you have to go to your smart TV guide. There's a smart TV guide where you can scroll down and you'll find FanDuel TV. But there are different platforms like Xfinity and, DirecTV, Dish Network. The FanDuel TV channel is on there. You just have to find it. It's not very easily found. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I don't know where to find it. I've never seen it. Like, I don't know where to get it. Like, do I have to download an app?
No. So if you have a smart TV, most of the smart TVs have their own live TV guide. So it's like, for example, my smart TV, it's Google, it's a Google platform.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an Android, for example, you have Google, right? And so my Gmail and my phone and my TV is all linked together. And part of the selection is live TV, and you just flip over from the app side to the live TV tab, and you got like a gazillion channels that I didn't discover till I got rid of Xfinity, to which I said, wow, I'm an idiot. I could have got rid of Xfinity a long time ago.
It was the best day I had. Remember, I walked right in, handed them the bag, and I said...
Same happened to me. They were like, hey, thanks for returning it. They thanked me for returning their box.
Yeah, that's what they should do. Thank you.
I was just like...
As opposed to not returning it,
Well, apparently, I guess people haven't returned it, so...
You get charged for that, though.
You do.
Yeah, so...
Which was actually funny to see that credit on my account the next month.
I have been out of the bundle, the cable bundle for a while, and I haven't looked back.
I feel it's almost liberating.
Once you get the hang of,
Right, not having to flip the Xfinity on. Now you got to go through the app.
Well, I had YouTube TV the whole time.
That's true.
So we only really had the cable box in the bedroom.
You were kind of like prepping yourself already for the eventual cut.
Pretty much, yeah.
I was a little more cold turkey than you were, so I
do know, the people like that are so used to it have a hard time getting out of it. But once you're in, although I will say, I'm interested to see if the streaming thing does hit like the iceberg and it goes back to the cable bundle.
It's a good question. I know that all the sports platforms are talking about that. It's supposed to drop, I believe, it's this fall. The ESPN, Turner Sports, Fox Sports conglomerate where they're all going to have all their games and you can purchase that instead of cable or YouTube TV. I'm waiting to see what that looks like because I may go in on that.
Yeah, that was one that, ESPN, TNT? No, TNT losing the NBA, though.
They are losing the NBA after this upcoming season, but they still have baseball and they still have some other sports as well there. And then you have Fox Sports as a part of this, too. And we know how much Fox has.
Yeah.
So, everybody's doing their own, bundle package coming soon. So it's going to be interesting to see whose bundle package is going to give you the most bang for your buck.
Well, I'm interested to see that whole situation with the Warner Brothers Discovery. What happens with them now because their stock is in the tank.
Yeah, they're falling apart. Which honestly was actually predicted by a couple people years ago that this guy Zaslav was going to mess up the whole thing. They said for Discovery, Turn, Time Warner. Yeah. And a partridge in a pear tree all under one trade. Yeah. Before we get out of here, Mike, I want to mention, I don't know if you were one of the people watching it, but the Indiana Fever versus Chicago Sky game on Sunday was the most watched WNBA game in 23 years.
Yeah.
3 million viewer peak was Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese. For comparison, the same game at the same time on the same day last year, Mike, on a Sunday afternoon, this was a 225% increase over last year in the same time slot, which was Phoenix Mercury versus the New York Liberty. Two super teams couldn't get this kind of viewership. Instead, two stinky teams, but with two star players, got 3 million viewers. It's also the most streamed WNBA game of all time, as well as Paramount Plus averaged about almost 100 households per minute streaming.
The whole WNBA story is becoming a really weird thing, and Caitlin Clark not making the Olympic team and that whole thing. I mean, that league is like, I was listening to a podcast about that league last night, though, about how they want to expand. I was listening to somebody say, like, they might add 2 teams every year for the next 10 years. So we'll see if that money, they're losing money still, the WNBA.
They are still losing money. They're going to be the least amount of lost money they've ever had. But, I mean, just because you're losing less money doesn't mean you're not still losing money.
Yeah, no, they
I just love the people who are online. They're like, see, they're making more money than they used to. But it's like, okay, but you're still losing money.
Right. Sports Bash Live. Before we get out of here tonight, I want to remind you, the NBA draft. My gosh, I blanked for a second. The NBA draft is next Wednesday, a week from tomorrow. So we'll talk more about the draft because the Sixers do have a lot of possibilities that could happen on draft night. They do have the 16th pick, but could they use that to add something similar to, I got to look at that Drew Holiday deal and see what they ended up doing there and see if there's something the Sixers can, because I told you, now Morey has the ability to try to do some things that he could try to make a deal with. So we'll have that all coming up before the draft next Wednesday on 97.3 ESPN.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
All right, 5:53, getting ready to get out of here. Hey, don't forget, we've got the draft a week from tomorrow. We're going to be getting into that more. We're going to be doing a free agent special as well. Austin Krell will be in when free agency starts. He's going to do a little in-studio session with us. That is July 1st, right? July 1st is when NBA, that's the Monday, right?
Well, yes, that's the Monday, but free agency, if you want to be technical, starts 6 p.m. June 3rd.
Yeah, we're not on the air that day.
No, we're not.
July 1st is when we're going to start that.
Yeah, if you want to get technical, like I do.
Yeah. July 1st. He'll be in studio Monday.
Cool.
Yeah. So we'll be all over that. And, of course, Phil's tonight. Gave you the lineup earlier. Interesting lineup. A little Martian left, Pache in center. So no Martian center and Dahl in left or Merrifield. You know, they could have gone that way. Merrifield in left and Marsh. They went with Pache in center and moved Marsh back to left. So that's, you know, we kept talking about Marsh and Pache platooning in center field with Dahl and Marsh, Merrifield platooning in left, and the Phillies said no, not so fast.
They were fortunate that Marsh didn't lose them the game last night with those 2 bonehead plays.
Yeah, he was not good in the outfield. Hey, they have sacrificed some defense for some more offense. We'll see how that how that works out for them. There are 8 games up. It's not like panic buttons, but we'll keep an eye on it. All right, that's it. That's all we got.
That's all, folks.
Got game night coming up next. You got anything good?
Yes, sorry. I was supposed to be speaking with former Eagles Connor Barwin about his Make-A-Wish, Make the World Better Foundation.
All right, that should be good. What time's that?
Supposed to be calling in at 6:20.
Okay. Well, listen for Connor Barwin tonight at 6:20. Coming up on game night. Hope you had a great day. Hopefully we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Appreciate everybody out there listening each and every day. I'm Mike Gill. Have a great night.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.